call me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive. Let's get lost tonight. Lord, who's on my right?
Hello, wackos. Welcome to Without a Country. Today is Wednesday, May 27th, the year 2026. Hope you're all doing well. Alfred immediately left. I even put a green pillow behind him so that he would really pop since he's a black dog on a black couch. But anyway, here we are. Reminder, adopt, don't shop. He's climbing on a pile of blankets on the floor right now. It's great. Hello. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us, whether you're joining us live or you're joining us after the fact. Remember, if you are joining us live, you have the ability to participate in the chat. If you want to send me an email, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. And as I was putting together today's show, if you are, listen to the show or watch this show often, you know that it is a common thing on this show that most times I don't create purposefully a theme on the show, but kind of organically the show always finds its own theme that we discuss as we're going through all the articles. And a lot of times, it's not until we discuss this at length or I discuss it in my apartment alone and you guys participate online that a theme really naturally comes together. But this week, I think the unintentional theme of this week's episode is clearly going to be about identity. Obviously, identity politics, big in politics in general. I think especially big on the left. It's not like the right doesn't have, identity politics. I just think it is kind of more so like one shared identity, whereas there are different specific identities that the left kind of bow down to, for lack of a better phrasing. And that is what I really saw coming together on this week's theme, both with articles that I chose that I wanted to discuss myself and with things that you guys sent in to me. We have a lot of listener based things today. Sorry, I was just adjusting. I think there's a little hot on the mic. We have a lot of things that you guys sent in that deal with identity and asked me to discuss this week. And I thought because, the past couple of weeks have been so story heavy that I would focus more on things that you guys wanted to discuss this week. But we still have plenty of just, regular news stories this week. All right. So quick, couple orders of business before we get into the meat of the show. Sunday, October 25th. I know that is a long time from now, but it's not as far away as you think, especially for those of you who celebrate Summerween. You can start thinking about Halloween during Summerween. And on Sunday, October 25th at 7 p.m., I will be bringing Gash back to the Comedy Store. They already reached out to me. They love that show. They're so supportive of it. They actually want to put it in the main room. It's in the belly room for now, but if we buy tickets in advance, we can bring it to the main room, which I've never done. I played the main room at the Comedy Store many times, both as a solo stand-up and with GWF, but I've never done Gash in the main room. So it's quite an honor that they wanted to put it in the main room, and it opens up the possibilities. We can do a much larger scale show and have more people in the room and get bigger names, because I think, as I discussed last week, some people, there are some comedians who are a little too good for the belly room. Even though many comics, I've performed in the belly room with Rogan and, Bill Burr, but there are some comics who won't perform there. So we could possibly get them on the show and, it's a whole thing. I have some ideas in my head of people who I've wanted to be on in the past, but I just don't think will play the belly room. So that's exciting. So again, tickets aren't on sale yet, but hold the date. And as soon as I get the art made by a human being, not AI, I will be putting that up probably sometime in June. I'll put tickets on sale, which is, mere days away. And if you can buy, I know it's weird to like commit to something in October, but like really, what are you doing on a Sunday in October? You're probably just going to go to work the next day. So why not make the weekend a little bit longer, a little bit more fun with coming to the Comedy Store to see me. Also, for those of you in my neck of the woods, New York, New Jersey area, if you are planning on attending the World Cup, more power to you, but just be aware that ICE is going to be all over that. The ACLU has been emailing nonstop. I don't think this is a surprise. Obviously, soccer tends to be more of it's not like super American yet, and so the people that tend to go to the World Cup are probably more likelihood of people who have immigrated to this country being at the World Cup. Therefore, ICE is salivating, and what should be just a really fun celebration of sports and soccer, and is going to be. I feel like it's going to turn into, I don't want to say a mini bloodbath, but I am, just because of all the like activist newsletters and nonprofit newsletters that I'm subscribed to. There's been a lot of talk about it, and I don't know what kind of a commitment New York City and New Jersey have made to stopping ICE from doing this at the World Cup. Obviously, it's like actually taking place in New Jersey, but it's, the responsibilities are, supposed to be split between New Jersey and New York City, as Mike and I were discussing earlier. A lot more of the burden is falling on New Jersey, and I just am a kind of like worried about it. So just be on, alert if you're attending. I don't want to scare you. I don't want to fear monger, but it's just about being alert and having a real game plan in place if you or a loved one happens to be detained. Just really important, especially at an event like where there's a high likelihood that you could be intoxicated and not be, thinking on your feet. Again, I don't want to fear monger around something that should just be fun, but unfortunately, this is the world that we live in, and I think it would be irresponsible of me not to bring that to everyone's attention being here. All right, let's get into the enemy of the state right now. The enemy of the state this week, I'm going to give it to AI. And again, this is not like a full-on attack on AI. I actually think AI has a lot to bring to the table. But I wanted to talk about this specific New York Times article where the Pope is now warning against AI. And so this article says, the Pope Leo warns of risks from AI in 42,300 word encyclical. The document marks a powerful foray by the leader of the Roman Catholic Church into the debate about the misuse or overuse of artificial intelligence. There's like a lot of things I'm thinking, before I read this article about what could be, when you're looking at the headline, I try to think in my head, like, okay, what are some issues that I could foresee? And I think, when you're looking at it from a religious standpoint, and we all know that I absolutely flounder when it comes to religious discussions, just because I am not like, I don't know, my religion is more like, I guess, just a code of ethics that I have created that I live by, rather than, the promise or hope for some eternal reward after I die. So it's a little bit different, but on the same lines as a traditional religion. And I think the threat with AI, for me, looking at this headline, was that it's something that could end up being like, I guess, bigger than God or more powerful than God. And that is the problem when it comes to religion and AI. But anyway, let's dive into the article. So Pope Leo on Monday set out a sweeping vision for corporate executives, politicians, and individuals who will shape and be shaped by the future of artificial intelligence, warning leaders to safeguard humanity from AI's most disruptive effects. Leo's declaration, and I guess also Also, when you are someone who is powerful, like the Pope, whether or not, whether we can argue whether we think Pope Leo is like a good Pope or a bad Pope, but when you are a powerful human, I guess your nightmare would be that something more powerful than an extremely powerful human exists during your lifetime, cue AI, Uh, unless you are one of the powerful humans behind AI, like Sam Altman or Elon Musk, in which case you have this very large opportunity to kind of control the future of the human mind, which is really scary when you say it like that. Again, I am not like fearful of AI, but I think that we have to be having really deep, complex conversations about it. And I see people online, as usual, are very black and white about it. They're either like all AI is slop, don't talk to AI, don't use AI, and unfortunately I think those people are going to be left in the dust. And then there's people who are very flippant about it, like, whatever, can't we just live, can't we just use AI? And as is my usual stance, I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, which very, very bad and uninteresting for discussions on the internet. But I am not going to start just taking hot takes that I don't agree with to get clicks. It's not my speed. Don't care for it. So Leo's declaration came in the form of a papal encyclical, an open letter to all people of goodwill that ran to roughly 42,300 words in its English version. It outlined his desire to protect human dignity and agency in an age in which technology threatens to replace humans in many professional and social roles. Which again is so kind of funny and the antithesis of religion to me, because isn't religion the belief that there is something bigger than humanity, right? People are going to not appreciate that if you're religious, but there is this, there's a supernatural element to religion, to gods, to deities. It is supernatural, basically. He presented it alongside Christopher Olah, a co-founder of Anthropic, a major AI developer, in a symbolic gesture of dialogue between leaders of the spiritual and technological worlds. That I also don't trust, because it's like, oh, now you're collabing. Okay. While emphasizing, that's what we always want our religious leaders to collab with the tech leaders. That is trustworthy. While emphasizing that technology should not be considered in itself as a force of antagonistic to humanity, he wrote that the pursuit of greater profits cannot justify choices that systematically sacrifice jobs. Among other things, Leo called for government regulation of the private companies that are driving the development of AI. Oh, yeah, because the government regulation, that'll make it respectable. Protection and retrain, but although there has to be some regulation, obviously, it's just funny that it's like, let's have one corrupt entity control another corrupt entity. Protection and retraining for workers whose jobs are threatened, education to help students think critically about the technology. I love that. Action to protect children from violent, hypersexualized, or fake information online that is often generated by AI. And to me, that's no different than conversation that I talked about being common when I was a little girl about don't let the molester abduct you when you're playing outside in front of your house. And now I don't think many kids are playing outside their house, especially without a parent watching them all the time. Because that's the thing about if you didn't grow up when I grew up. So this is, by the time I was playing outside alone, it was early 90s, right? But, we have a small house. So if I yelled from the front lawn or the backyard, my mom could hear me in the kitchen. But my mom would regularly be in the kitchen, washing dishes or whatever. It makes it seem very trad wife, but not at all. My mom was just constantly working hard. And so she'd be in the kitchen, and she would always leave it so that, the screen door was open so that there would be a way for sound to travel. And again, there's two rooms that you'd have to go through before you got to the kitchen. But I lived in a small colonial house. So again, if I bellowed from the front yard, and your girl has had a big voice since she was little, my mom could be at the door within 20 seconds, right? If not less, 10 seconds, depending on how fast she decided to go. And so it would still be pretty hard to be abducted. But I think that's the conversation like that this generation of children has to be having. It's, like there's always a generational conversation for children, and that will serve to protect them in the future. And I just think that this is perhaps this generation's conversation. So really it feels so different, but I don't think it's actually that different when you look at it. Safeguards to ensure that humans, not artificial intelligence, remain responsible for all decisions regarding the use of weapons. Above all, he emphasized the importance of retaining a fundamental social role for all human beings. A society that guarantees employment to only a small fraction of the population, despite having a high level of technical development, risks exposing many to forced inactivity, he wrote. And I think in that, you want to make sure that people maintain a sense of purpose, because we know in a time when people already feel so disconnected that this could be a bigger threat. You don't feel purpose, you lack community, you're not having interpersonal relationships, you're focused mostly on parasocial relationships, like your mental health is going to be shit. This creates a paradox of material progress and anthropological regression that undermines the foundations of a just and stable social peace, he added. Leo, presenting the encyclical to a packed hall at the Vatican, said his views had been shaped by conversations with scientists, engineers, and political leaders. He singled out Mr. Ola, with whom he pledged to work to find a way for humanity in this time of artificial intelligence. What a great sign of hope it is that in our differences we can listen to one another, Leo said. Mr. Ola, who is not Catholic, praised the Pope's initiative, acknowledging that companies like his own need moral guidance to avoid being swayed by a set of incentives and constraints that can sometimes conflict with doing the right thing. And for those of you who think that, people working in tech really are only thinking about the bottom line and profit, I would push back against that. I think ultimately maybe the people who stay in tech, they must concentrate on that to keep their jobs. But again, in Stolen Focus, there is a lot of talk about people who were early in, the social media expansion of technology, who had real deep ethical conversations about what phone technology and social media technology specifically were doing to humanity, and many people quit over it. So it's just not true that these people don't think about the effects of their work and only think about making money, because I think it's really split when it comes to that. We need moral voices that the incentives cannot bend, Mr. Ola added. Today is just the beginning, the start of a long collaboration between those of us who are building this and those who can see what we from the inside cannot, Mr. Ola said. Both men spoke, along with a panel of theologians and Vatican officials, before an audience of cardinals, computer scientists, journalists, and diplomats, including Brian Birch, the United States ambassador to the Holy See. Leo had made clear his concerns with AI as early as his second day as Pope just over a year ago, when he told the College of Cardinals that under his leadership, the church would address the risks that the evolving technology poses to human dignity, justice, and labor. I really have to do more research into the Pope, because I'm always like, the Pope always seems to me to be having like very, like, I understand it's like the religiously, like the head of the Catholic Church, right? And so anything that could be possibly a religious discussion falls under the umbrella of what he does. And where morality and the guidelines for living a moral life as a human being begin and end. But it's always just like interesting what that little rascal the Pope gets himself into. And this is for all popes, not just the specific pope. He has since repeatedly spoken about AI, including during a trip to Turkey and Lebanon, in an address to Catholic university leaders, and even when celebrating the International Day of Mathematics. Last week, the Vatican announced it had created a commission of senior Catholic officials to discuss the challenges posed by AI. Did you have something to say, Mike? I saw you enter the joke.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just accidentally bumped myself out. I did. Well, I was gonna jump in with this a little bit later on, but one of the cool things I saw on Threads about this whole discussion was
Uh-huh.
that people can now use this as a way to conscientious object to using AI in the workplace on religious grounds, and no HR in the
Really?
country can come. Well, I mean, like I said, this is Threads talking, so take it with a grain of salt. But there somebody did post thing that said, "Hey, because the Pope said this is not a good thing, can I use this
Oh,
as
it
an
was a
excuse?"
question.
And somebody responded, "Hey, HR here, like been working corporate HR for years. It'll be tough, but you can put this down as like, yeah, I have a religious exemption that says I can't use AI. And if you then get fired because you don't want to get with the program and start using AI, you'd have a lawsuit down the line for religious discrimination."
Right. And when you Google that, I mean, there's not a ton yet. The first thing that comes up is from ogletree.com, which I'm not even fully sure what that is. It's some kind of, here, I can look at the About Us. It's at Ogletree Deacons, we provide coverage through 60 offices and 30. What? Coverage of what? Represent employers. Oh, is this a law firm? It sounds like a law firm. Representation, yeah,
Did
client
you
service. This looks like a law firm to me.
Yeah, did
But
you just get baited into like, hey, do you have an AI related religious issue at your job?
well,
Click here for the class action lawsuit.
not baited, but a lot of law firms have, kind of like basically blogs or their own version of Substack. And this says this is a conversation from April 13th of this year. And it says the mark of the bot when employees raise religious objections to workplace AI usage. So I think this is probably something that we're going to see, different cases about this, probably already filed, but this is something like, the same as, there was different like podcasting legal things that I had to kind of work to set when it was the wild, wild west legally. That's a new like lawsuit for, I guess, lawyers to sink their teeth into. That's very interesting though. Okay, back to the article. So, Pope Francis, Leo's immediate predecessor, had also warned about the dangers of artificial intelligence and called for ethical use of technology. Although Leo publicly presented his encyclical on Monday, he formally signed it on May 15th, the 135th anniversary of the publication of Rerum Novarum, or Of New Things in English, a major encyclical written in 1891 by his namesake Leo the, what is that, 10, 11, 13th. The Pope's encyclical was timed to prompt comparisons with that earlier document, which guided Catholic teaching on how to protect workers after the technological and industrial disruptions of the 19th century. Written amid the upheaval of the Industrial Revolution, Rerum Novarum sought to safeguard the rights and dignity of the working class and became one of the foundational texts of modern Catholic social teaching. It called on governments to save unfortunate working people from the cruelty of men of greed who use human beings as mere instruments for money making, even as it praised the discoveries of science. And like sometimes I read stuff like this and I'm like, I agree. But when we're talking about money making and it's coming from the Catholic Church, I really do have to just roll my eyes a bit. We're talking about one of the biggest money makers of all time here, untaxed. In the new encyclical titled Magnifica Humanitas, or Magnificent Humanity, Leo struck a similar tone, warning of the new threat to workers posed by artificial intelligence. Work, he wrote, is more than a way of earning income, but a requirement of the human condition, a normal path toward maturity, development, and personal fulfillment. I don't think Gen Z agrees, but okay. And that's not like a slight against them. I just think that I'm talking about that pretty seriously, where I think, for so long, the American way of life certainly is that like work is so much a part of our culture. And I do think that Gen Z in a real way is pushing it back against that. And like, sure, sometimes it comes off as lazy, but sometimes I think it comes across as like a real question of like, what is the meaning of life? And I think a lot of people don't believe that it is to work your life away. And I think that's like a little bit hard to argue with. Like, I love work, and work for me is like a good way to live my life, but I don't think everyone should live the way I do. Like, everyone would not enjoy this. Um And it's some, and as I talked about a long time, it's like, I'm not really living life for joy, which I think you can tell. I'm living it for like contribution, but that's like a conscious choice that I have made. And I do not expect everyone to live in that way. If they don't want to, it's your life, it's your choice. He called for the protection of employment opportunities and the irreplaceable role of the individual. The encyclical also called for imposing the most rigorous ethical constraints on weapons developed using artificial intelligence, continuing Leo's and the Vatican's longstanding opposition to war. The growing ease in which autonomous weapons systems can be deployed makes more feasible and less subject to human control, Leo wrote. And especially like, I think there's again like a mind issue there. Like if you're the one who has to like deploy a weapon, like if a human being has to do it, there's going to just naturally be more thought in there. But like if you can kind of like type something into AI and then AI is handling it, you're yet one more step removed from taking away human life, and that just makes it easier because you don't have the weight of the death on your shoulders. That, he added, contradicted the principle that armed force should be used only as a last resort in cases of legitimate self-defense. Leo also used the encyclical to apologize for the Vatican's role in slavery. In a section about modern-day slavery, Leo personally apologized for the papacy's failure to condemn earlier forms of slavery and for supporting rulers who engaged in it. And earlier Pope John Paul II apologized in 1985 for the role of Christians in perpetuating the slave trade, but did not explicitly discuss the Vatican's role. Although the encyclical includes significant references to scripture and religious teachings, the document in many ways reads like a policy paper from a think tank or a lawmaker. Leo wrote in detail, for example, of the importance of protecting children who are particularly susceptible to the warping effects of technology. Psychological and psychiatric literature has documented with growing insistence how early and unsupervised exposure to digital devices and social media can negatively impact sleep, attention span, control of emotions, and relationships, especially during the most vulnerable stages of life, at times with tragic consequences, he wrote. Scholars were divided about what effect, if any, the document would have on the technology industry, in which rival tech titans are jostling with Anthropic for dominance. Brian Patrick Green, director of technology ethics at Santa Clara University in Northern California, said some technology leaders will have to take it seriously in a sense, partly because it provides them with a moral imperative, even as it is recognized as it recognized their autonomy. The church, he said, does not claim to supplant, sorry, something signed out and I'm being distracted, to supplant the responsibilities of politics or institutions, but offers itself as a foundation, urging other institutions to recognize and promote whatever serves the dignity of persons, the vitality of communities, and the common good. Others said that an encyclical's primary targets are the clergy and the faithful. I don't think the tech bros in Silicon Valley will listen that much, said Professor Noreen Herzfeld, director of program on technology and ethics at St. John's School of Theology and Seminary in Collegeville, Minnesota. But I think within the church, it will be there as a reference for priests and bishops, and particularly for those of us who are educating seminarians or young people. Priests can use the contents of the document to guide conversations with parishioners who share their concerns about the technological pressures of modern life, Professor Herzfeld said. All right. So I just thought that was like a very interesting discussion. And again, I do, even though I am not super, religious as far as mainstream religion is concerned, I do find discussions or theological discussions extremely interesting, especially when there's this crossover between modern technology and one's religion. All right, so that is our enemy of the state, again, AI, and take it with a grain of salt. Again, I don't want to make you scared of something that I don't think we need to be scared of, but rather be aware of and be active in this conversation. We can't just say, oh, whatever happens, happens. I think that's a real losing attitude. All right, let's get into the wacko mailbag. Again, I have a lot of good things to discuss. Real quick from Eric, who's a member of Free Vices, are the band behind the theme song on Without a Country. I just wanted to let you guys know, this is from Eric Hay, just released this album. Free Vices released a new album. I will put the link to it in the show notes. It's a deep dive into the state of affairs of the world and also mental health and love. We hope you have the opportunity to listen. Thank you again for everything you've done to support us. And then they want to send us physical copies. And I'll reply to that email, hopefully, if I can remember by the end of the show. They're making like actual physical albums of it, and they want to send us all copies. So that will be exciting. But definitely support Free Vices and take a listen to their album. It's on, Apple is the link they sent, but it's probably on other streaming services. Another quick email from someone who wants to remain anonymous. It's about a scam that's going on. The writer says, I'm a therapist and working with Medicaid and low-income populations. I had a client tell me that the family got scammed out of $5,000 from someone pretending to be a lawyer to help get a family member out of an ICE detention center. It broke my heart that this scam is out there, especially because a lot of families might not be able to report this kind of scam due to fear over their own immigration status, which, I mean, obviously is part of the scam. They know this. I'm hoping this will help raise awareness to this type of scam. And so I just want to put that out there. There, are multiple scams that we have heard of, as it pertains to ICE. Specifically, one was like, the people offering help to get food and other necessities to families who are not able to go out for fear of being detained. That they were, being posted by ICE, but this is yet another scam. Again, disheartening, but not necessarily surprising. And the next two emails are responses that I actually asked for in episode 331, I believe it was. I specifically asked why a lot of Latino people are white supremacists, and two people sent in really thoughtful answers. So I wanted to share that with you. Obviously I am not Latino, so this was not something that I could talk about with a level of expertise. So this is from a female wacko who wishes to remain anonymous. And again, a lot of the things you guys write in, you want to remain anonymous. And I totally respect that. Obviously, it just like makes me sad. It doesn't make me sad. It just makes me sad about society, because that's exactly what this show is about, like being able to have these conversations. And obviously, like, I'm the face of the show. So like, I'm willing to put myself in a place of risk. Like, I'm not trying to be like, look at me, I'm so brave. It's just like, I'm just fucking tired of everyone who wants to have a conversation, like being scared of saying the wrong thing all the time. Conversations need to be had. And if that makes me unbookable, fucking fuck it. I don't care. But like, yeah, just so many of you guys write in, and I completely understand why you want to remain anonymous, because you're obviously, if you're listening to this show, you're really open to having conversations that might make people uncomfortable, but like, you don't even want your first name associated with it, because, you don't want to be tracked down. You don't want to have to, deal with the pushback or HR at your job. And it fucking sucks that this is, America, where free speech is, something that is part of the pillars of our country, and we can't even have conversations. Insane. So, hi, Corinne. I was listening to the podcast when you asked why so many Hispanic men vote MAGA, and here are a few of my thoughts based on my own limited lived experience. A lot of Hispanic culture is already deeply rooted in machismo, religion, rigid gender roles, nationalism, and conservative family structures. So MAGA messaging resonates more naturally than outsiders expect. National pride and identity are also very strong in many Hispanic communities. You constantly see Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican, or Dominican flags on cars, businesses, clothing, tattoos, etc. A lot of people strongly identify with nationality and project it openly. So rhetoric around nationalism, authority, masculinity, and traditional values already has fertile ground. That same culture also contributes to anti-LGBTQ attitudes. There are sayings like, and please, you guys know I didn't take Spanish, I took French, so this is going to be butchered real bad. There are sayings like, prefiero que mi hija si puta que pata, which roughly translate to, I'd rather my daughter be a whore than a dyke. Fun, that's a nice saying for for your culture. Good cultural saying. It reflects how deeply some communities stigmatize queerness while still excusing or normalizing toxic behavior from men. I also think the I came here the right way mentality, which is really big if you take a lot of Ubers, because I love to have a conversation with Uber drivers because that's a popular occupation for people who have immigrated here. And so I'm always, having conversations like that. And honestly, some of the most like xenophobic conversations that I've like, or the most xenophobic points of view I've heard are from people who they themselves are, first generation Americans, and or not even first generation, meaning like they themselves immigrated here, and it really blows my mind. But it's the same as like we see this a lot. Like, it's like, oh, I did it the right way. So, or I suffered. So you should have to, you see a very similar trend in feminism. Like, again, back to being a female in comedy. So a lot of the older women in comedy are some of the most misogynistic people that you'll ever run into, because they don't want, because they had it so hard being a woman earlier in comedy. And instead of wanting it to be easier for young female comics or younger female comics, they're like, no, I paid my dues and you have to pay your dues too, which I understand. But I think, the sign of a society that is progressing, that it is that the hurdles that one generation had to go through should be easier, because for the generation after them, because they should have been smooth, the problem should have been smoothed out a bit. And that doesn't mean that their experience will be easier. It's just that those specific hurdles will be easier. And then obviously, like the AI discussion that we just had, the generation below you will have new problems that it will then be their responsibility, or their burden to go through the hardest part of those new issues again, then smooth it out for the next generation. That's how I think a progressive society should work. But many people disagree with me, but they're wrong. For that one, I'm just going to say they're wrong. I understand wanting people to have to like earn things or work for things. I get it. It does build character, but there will always be opportunities to do those things. I do feel like a generation fails if the specific hurdles of that generation are not smoothed out at least a little bit by the time it comes for your children and your children's children, or your nieces and nephews. In my from my perspective, if it doesn't make it a bit easier, that means that you failed. It means that you didn't fight back. I don't see any other way to look at that. Back to this email. I also think that the I came here the right way mentality, or the idea that I earn my refugee migrant status or right to be here, is huge. A lot of people want to separate themselves from newer immigrants or other marginalized groups and position themselves as not one of them. Their own story is viewed as nuanced, justified, and earned, while everyone else's is framed as laziness, criminality, or bad choices. It reminds me of people who think my abortion was justified, but everyone else is irresponsible. Crazy. Any abortion is justified. And honestly, some of it feels like, and again, this is the writer's language. I'm just writing it exactly how it was written. So some of these words are going to make you uncomfortable, and honestly, some of it feels like coonery or a house Negro mentality. I know those words are loaded, but it's the clearest way I can verbalize the dynamic, especially in communities with proximity to whiteness, colorism, or economic mobility. With some lighter skinned Hispanic groups, including certain Cubans, I absolutely think there are people who consciously or unconsciously align themselves socially and politically with whiteness or with power structures they feel closer to culturally or racially. There is definitely colorism within Hispanic cultures that people pretend does not exist. Skin bleaching, relaxing curly hair, praising Eurocentric features, comments about marrying lighter, etc., are all things many of us grew up around. I also think some Hispanic groups overcenter their own suffering while minimizing what other groups experience. There can be this attitude of our people suffered the most while dismissing systemic issues affecting Black Americans, newer immigrants, or other marginalized groups. Again, this is just my own lived experience and limited frame of reference, but it's also something I believe is so deeply harming us as a populace and something I struggle to come to terms with. Watching people vote against what I perceive to be their own self-interests is honestly mind-boggling at times. But I also think people too often make assumptions about what Hispanic voters prioritize. And I really love this. I love this whole email because I just think it's really well thought out. And, so often I open my inbox and I'm so just like moved by the internal dialogue that you guys have with yourselves and the critical thinking, and like it honestly brings a damn tear to my eye, because it's not about like the conclusion that you come to, really, for me. Sorry if you can pop that comment again, Mike. It's just about like having the conversation. This is from Night Watch 5, from the RGV heavy Catholic conservative Latinos. And then we bought into the bootlicking too hard, whitewashed AF. Only way out was the military and more falling in line. Yeah, so I mean, I love this conversation. I'm so glad that a lot of you responded to it and had such interesting thoughts about it, because it's something that I see, and I have some thoughts on why I thought it was so, but I didn't want to talk about it as an outsider. So I'm so glad that people on the inside wrote in. There's this tendency to reduce, and the reduction of voters is such a great conversation. I think it's a conversation that we kind of only have around election time, but it's a conversation that really, especially the Democratic Party, needs to be having now, in preparation for the 2028 elections, especially after that shoddy autopsy of Democrats 2024, which we'll get into in a bit. But even though it was, pretty much useless, the work they did in true Democrat fashion. But the reduction of voters into being single issue voters, which is like still seen through like this white Eurocentric lens, continues to amaze me, because, just because you're Latino or Black doesn't mean necessarily that that's the only thing that you think of, and that's like the lens through which you see the world. But that's what white people, or many white people, reduce it to. The same as there are so many women who vote against female interests, but they obviously don't see themselves as female in the world first. They see themselves as something else first. And I think when I was younger, a younger comic, I saw myself as I think I used to say that I saw myself as a comic before a woman. But now definitely woman is like first. That's like, if you're talking about like the order in which I see things, some people think of themselves as like a wife first, like their role in their family unit. And some people think of themselves as a mom first. It just depends. Like there's so many lenses that you could lead with. And I think that really informs how you're going to vote. So there's this tendency to reduce Hispanic voters to immigration issues alone, when I honestly think for many people, religion, machismo, nationalism, and traditional gender roles, i.e., and female subservience or subjugation, are viewed as more aligned with their perceived self-interest, identity, and worldview than immigration solidarity is. Yeah, for sure. And, they said, please withhold my name and information. Thank you for always bringing a varied viewpoint to the conversation. So thank you so much for writing in. I thought this email was like very interesting, and it makes perfect sense. And again, I think like, especially if you're white and really politically involved, especially if you're on the left. But, I think in all cases, it's just to be a better human being. We have to stop reducing minorities to like, they are definitely going to vote this way because they care about this one thing. It's like, have you talked to them? Crazy. And this is another answer to the same call to action I had. This is from Wacko Eric. Hi, Corinne and Wacko team. I am listening now to 331, where Corinne would like an explanation why Latinos can sometimes be white supremacists. Unfortunately, I can answer this due to a lot of my Mexican family being MAGA, evangelical Catholics, who don't think of themselves as Mexican, but Spanish, and therefore white. And again, it's like, we're kind of using Latino and Hispanic interchangeably in this conversation, but I do think it pertains to all groups, but as you, to both these groups of people, but as you can see from the writers, there is like a different mindset. So if you're, some of these groups that self-identify as Hispanic are thinking of themselves as white, as opposed to, Latino, who I think would think of themselves as Latino. Again, it's like I told you, this is a very identity heavy episode, but it is one of my favorite things to discuss because it does, affect politics so deeply these days. I think deep down in Mexico, there was a lot of shame. And back in the day, in the 1950s, your Mexican birth certificate would break down if you had any indigenous heritage or blood. It was much like how USA would do the same to Black people, all the, in quotes, octoroons and similar stuff like that. The Spanish made this system, you can look it up, called castas. Many of my family is white passing, so they would rather just say nothing about their Mexican heritage. They want to go to Mexico for the resorts, speak broken Spanish, but overall look down on everyone there. And in turn, Mexicans also look down on them. There is even a slang term for this, which they called my grandma once while she was flying back to the USA back in the day. And then the writer links to it, and it's La Malinche, LAMALINCHE. And this is based on a historical figure called Marina or Melinson, circa 1500 to 1529, more popular known as La Malinche, or like Malins, maybe. I can't tell. Malinte, I can't tell. There's like a explanation, but I don't know what it's trying to tell me. Was a Nahua woman from the Mexican Gulf Coast who became known for contributing to the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire by acting as an interpreter, advisor, and intermediary for the Spanish conquistador Hernan Cortez. She was one of 20 enslaved women given to the Spaniards in 1519 by the natives of Tabasco. Cortez chose her as a consort, and she later gave birth to their first son, Martin, one of the first mestizos, people of mixed European and indigenous American ancestry in New Spain. So that's just an explanation of that saying. Back to the email. I am, on the other hand, very lucky that my mom doesn't feed into this BS. We're proud and respect our indigenous roots, which we're part of genetically and culturally. Much of Mexico is coming to terms with this past racism system. But in my opinion, many Latinos in USA are trying to fit in order to either stay safe, make money, or self-hatred pushed to go along with the narratives given them about themselves. Look at the fact that the Proud Boys was led by a Latino. Yes. I am half white, Swedish. So life for me has been a lot of being in between cultures. And I hope this explains a bit about a part of the history. But there is so much more. Thanks for all the work you do on the show. So again, just wanted to bring that to the table. I thought this was really interesting conversation to have, and something that was really, really surfaced hard because of MAGA, right? All right. Yeah, when Christina and I were at the Trump rally in Latrobe, Pennsylvania for the Daily Show piece, or like documentary, we ran into this couple from the Bronx. I believe they were Dominican, if my memory serves me, and they were they were so pro-Trump, and they were there like selling all this Trump merch, right? And like, you're just like, what the, vote however you want to, but like, what is going on here? All right. And then this is the last piece that I have for the wacko mailbag. A wacko named Stephanie specifically reached out to me about this controversy with a TikTok creator that she felt like really fell within the topics that we discuss on this show. The TikTok creator's name is Paris Mwendwa. She is a Black woman, younger Black woman. And again, because this is such a heavy discussion about identity, it is important that you know that. And some of the original TikToks have been deleted. So like, I was talking to Stephanie this afternoon because I had promised her that I would discuss this, and I wanted to do my due diligence, but I also was like, I can't spend 5 hours going down a TikTok rabbit hole. So basically, in short, Paris talks about a lot of things. She talks about eating disorders and the difference in body expectations between Black women and white women. A lot of interesting conversations. Like, I honestly think I'm going to go back and follow her. I really liked some of the conversations that she was having. I don't think she's based in New York, but if she is, gosh, I would love to have her on GWF. But but the conversation that she was really getting canceled in quotes for recently was that she was accused of being a TERF. And I couldn't find any videos in which she was saying anything that to me felt remotely turfy. And again, you know my thoughts on TERF. People just, anytime you even bring up anything where you're trying to talk about trans women and cis women, you're going to get called a fucking TERF immediately. And that's, a way of silencing, in my opinion. But this particular conversation, I think the accusation was more that Paris had created an online space in which she allows turfy comments, under her videos, which are, if we're going to choose one umbrella that they all fall under, it is feminism. So that was the complaint. Again, a little bit hard to follow, but I think there was some interesting videos I came across in this that I wanted to share. Mike, are you able to play TikToks from your end where we can hear the audio? Because I would like to play both of these TikToks. Okay. So the first one, let me just set up, is going to be this creator, Lesbian Lifts. Again, this is more TikTok than Instagram. So Lesbian Lifts, who is, as you might imagine, a lesbian who weightlifts. She kind of started this conversation. She is a smaller creator. She has about 70,000 something followers, whereas Paris has about, 300,000 plus followers on TikTok. Again, I do think that's important in this conversation, because in this world where we're all trying to get attention, I do think sometimes smaller creators try to create problems where there are none. I've been the victim of that myself, and just to get more followers, and it often works. So let's just listen to this first commentary by Lesbian Lefts.
Focus on cisgender women and the issues. You know what else is so funny to me about the supposedly well-meaning feminists who care about trans women but only want their feminism to focus on cisgender women and the issues that cisgender women face? They will always resort to, can't we have a feminism that focuses on our problem and trans women can have their own version of feminism? Like, what do you mean about your own problem? Are you talking about reproductive health care? Because if that's the case, it's like, do you not think that trans women are not aware of their own anatomy? Do you not think that they do not know that there are experiences that you are going to have with your body and your reproductive anatomy that they might not have? Do you think that they also don't care about those issues? Do you think that they don't care about your reproductive health? Do you think that they don't care about your access to reproductive health care? And do you think that they're not also fighting for your access to reproductive health care? Because, hey, wait a second, a lot of their health care is under the same system. And oftentimes when cisgender women's reproductive health care is under attack or at risk of being ripped away from us, so is the healthcare of trans women. You cannot be transphobic under the guise of woke. You cannot exclude trans women from feminism because you only want to talk about your problems. It doesn't work that way. It does not. Talk about your oppression. Talk about the issues that you face as a cisgender woman and allow trans women to be a part of that conversation. They want to be a part of that conversation. They want to support you. You're probably transphobic, or maybe you don't even realize that you're transphobic and you're hiding it under the guise of, I just care about women. Because what kind of women do you care about? You know what else is so fun?
Okay, so first of all, I want to point out that this creator has turned the comments off on that video. And the second thing is, if you're not watching, if you're listening, that Lesbian Lifts is white, which and cisgender, which I think is also important to note. I mean, cisgender, unless I'm missing something, but I think she is. And I think that's important to note again, because this is just a deep conversation about identity. She brings up some interesting points that I'm going to push back on, and again, I'm sure would in the spaces that she creates for would get called a TERF. But welcome to another day discussing feminism as a cisgender person. Like it's just part of it. Number one, I think it's such an interesting conversation to for a white cisgender woman to have about kind of intersectional feminism when the person you're responding to is a Black woman. Because if we're talking about who is left out or who feels most alienated from feminism, and we're going like trans women versus Black women, I would actually argue that like the phrase or white feminism exists for a reason, and that is because people of color, and I think most predominantly Black women, are often the people who feel like that feminism does not include them, which I think is a lot of the stuff that Paris talks about. Again, I just kind of like was getting acquainted with who she is as a creator today, so I don't want to speak too much about her perspective, but I did also watch a video where she explains that she grew up in white spaces amongst white people, which I think is interesting because I know some people might think that then because of that she has like this ingrained whiteness. But I would also argue that it could make her hyper aware and hyper vigilant about what it's like to be Black in America, because she, I'm guessing, felt in some way like an outsider because of her skin color for most of her life in white spaces. Again, I'm putting a little bit onto that. I haven't sat down and had a conversation with her, but I just thought this was interesting to come in with. And then the second part where Lesbian Lifts talks about how trans women are so active in the conversation about cisgender women's healthcare. What? I do not think that is true at all. You guys know this is certainly a big problem I have with the male gay community. That it's, so many cisgender women have advocated and spent a lot of our lives doing work for the gay community when they needed things like marriage equality or to be treated as equals in the legal system or in the workplace, or during the AIDS epidemic. Obviously I'm too young for that, but these are things that historically cisgender women have really widely participated in. And one of my biggest things is then when our rights are being threatened from being stripped from us, or the overturning of Roe v. Wade, a lot of these people did go silent. So again, I don't know. I just really think a lot of the points in there, it's like, you can say that trans women are welcome in feminism. Yes, there's different types of women, but and whether that means like Black, white, Latino, Asian, trans, any kinds of women. But the conversation is also, I lost my train of thought, but it's about identity. But to say that like transgender women and cisgender women are going through the exact same problems is just untrue. Like, that doesn't make you a TERF. I think it's like you have basically it's two circles, it's a diagram, and in the center you have the intersection of problems that affect are for both trans women and cisgender women. A lot of like basically walking around the world presenting as a woman, the problems that leads to, but issues like being treated as a vessel only for reproduction, or not having access to reproductive health care, or getting fired from your job because you're on maternity leave. Like, these are issues that just will absolutely never affect a trans women, and therefore you don't really hear them talking about them. And I found a response from a Black female cisgender creator named, I think it's BUNMI Supreme, but I think it says Boonmi. I think she put the pronunciation in her TikTok. And this was like another response again to this. So I thought this was really interesting. And just, I want you to know that this specific creator now, I don't know when she added this, but now in her bio on TikTok, it says, "I am not a feminist or a TERF," which I did find off-putting. Anytime someone says I'm not a feminist and feels like that's something that needs to be advertised, I just feel like it is so inherently off-putting to me. I also think it's off-putting when you say I am a feminist. I would just assume that if you're a person and again, this is a wrong assumption, but I would hope that if you're a person, male, female, non-binary, they, that, whatever it is, I would just hope that you're a feminist in 2026. That is not true. But I specifically feel like when especially women note publicly, when they shout it from the rooftops that they are not a feminist, nothing gives me the ick more. Apart from that, I think this creator is like really intelligent, and I love a lot of the things that she has to say. So, and I think she has a really well thought out kind of dissertation on the matter. So, Mike, if you could play this second one again, all kind of responses to the same situation, but none of the OG creator.
Women are the only group of women that are above critique, because anytime you attempt to say anything to the trans community, it's labeled as transphobic. I'm actually happy that this conversation is occurring, because how are we supposed to have allyship with a group that we can't even speak on? Fear of being canceled. One time I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw like, some trans girls talking, and they were like, kept saying, oh yeah, we're giving fish, it's giving fish. And y'all can go look up what that means. But I realized very quickly that this is a misogynistic term that means, it's giving that you were born a cisgender woman. So I'm in the comments, I'm like, hey, like, this is misogyny. Like, this is blatant misogyny, labeling women as fish, knowing that the term fishy has been historically used to talk bad about women's genitalia. And I immediately got bombarded with comments about I need to mind my own community's business. I'm a TERF this. And I will say that the only reason that I'm just now talking about this now is that it did effectively silence me, right? Term was used to generate fear within inside me so that I would not continue to push back, but also create rhetoric around my name and my page so that I would be viewed as an unsafe person for trans people. It seems to me that a lot of trans women want to fall under the protection of women without actually having actual community with cisgendered women. But also they want cisgendered women to come to their rescue, to do the work, the labor, without actually doing any congruent labor or advocacy for cisgendered women. I don't see trans women making content about pro-choice, about menstrual products for women, about free healthcare for women. I don't see trans women doing all of that. So to me, to ask cisgendered women to do the labor that transgender women aren't doing for cisgender women is unfair. Also, I feel like they're not being asked to question their internalized misogyny. I do think that telling cisgender women that is transphobic to question trans women's upbringing as males as transphobic is disingenuous, right? We all know that social programming plays a large role in gender identity. Telling cisgender women that it's transphobic to ask trans women to acknowledge their male social programming is weird to me, right? It's a form of silencing. Even cisgendered women have misogynistic social programming. So to think that somehow it escaped a group of people who were born male is asinine to me. It does not make sense. Anytime I come to the trans community with a problem or a issue with language or rhetoric that I have that they're spewing, and it's met with, oh, you're a TERF, mind your own community business, then why should cisgender women be responsible for advocating for trans women if we're not even allowed to speak on their community? How are they allowed to speak about the rhetoric being said in the cisgender community if we're not allowed to question the rhetoric being said in the transgender community? If we're all women, then that means that we should all be fighting the same good fight. But if y'all are helping spread misogyny, I don't see how that serves a purpose for cisgender women. How does that help cisgender women? It doesn't, right? I think that there is a lot of one-way advocacy here that isn't being addressed. It is purposely being not addressed because a lot of trans women do not want to address their internal misogyny. They don't care because they're just enjoying being women, right? They don't have the social programming that holds cisgender women. They don't have the responsibilities of society that society looks for women to fulfill, like to have children, to start a family, to be overly nurturing and caring, and to suffer for the sake of others. That responsibility will never be put on transgender women. I do think that there is a genuine, larger, broader conversation that needs to be had here. And if you are a cisgendered male, you need to stay the fuck out of it because you will never fucking understand.
So I don't know where the end of that conversation necessarily came from. Obviously, like there's points of it I'm missing. I don't, you know me. I don't really disagree with it. I just was like, whoa, where did that come? Where did the shut the fuck up to men come from? Because I'm like, it's a conversation that most of the comments I see are women, whether they be trans women or cis women. So I thought that was interesting. But I'm not saying I agree with every single word of what that creator said, but I really thought that was well thought out. A lot of great points. A much stronger piece than the lesbian lifts piece. And just like a lot more realistic, a lot less like trying to have the right point of view and having like an actual like realistic point of view about how the world works. And I specifically think that she brought up a couple things that I have thought about or spent a long time thinking about. So, she talks about how and this is specifically a conversation about trans women. Again, if we want to talk about who's excluded from the conversation a lot, and I know it's like, feminist conversation. So obviously trans men then would not be a part of it because they would be a part of male conversations. But like when we talk about the manosphere, like, damn well, trans men aren't welcome there. So, where is their role? Where are they allowed to exist in society would be my question. Again, we just really talk about trans women ad nauseum and have so much fewer conversations about trans men, and just put a pin in that. Why? So it says, that creator just said there's this conversation among trans women where like they want to be welcome in every female community, but cisgender women are not welcome in their in the trans woman community. So basically like they get two communities to be a part of, and they are welcome, no questions asked, or they say they should be welcome, no questions asked within the cisgender female community, but we are not welcome in the trans woman community. And I think that's a really interesting point and a very valid, realistic point that she brought up. And again, I have no problem with trans women existing within the female at large community, but the problem is in many female spaces, trans women do tend to have the louder voices. And because cisgender women are so programmed to just follow orders and to stay in line and to not be problematic, then cisgender women often don't speak up. And, when we're talking about, creating, pieces to support different groups, again, this creator points out that they don't see trans women creating content pieces to support cis women. And I gotta agree with that. I'm a very online person. I don't see a ton of that. Whereas I would say I see more, and again, obviously I'm a cis woman, so my algorithm is built for a cis woman, but I would say predominantly the pro-trans or like in support of trans content I see is mostly made by cis women. I see more pro-trans women content by cis women than I see pro-trans content by trans women. And I follow a good deal of trans women. I actually see the trans creators that I follow, I see having a lot of conversations where they specifically point out that they do in fact acknowledge that they have a different experience in the world than cisgender women, and they find it to be preposterous. Who is this is, and again, I know these are just, these are isolated people. That's not a representation. No individual is representative of an entire group. One of my favorite trans creators, just because she is so smart with the nutritional information that she gives out, is Gabby Tuft. And it's GABBITUFT. I mean, if you're going to follow her, it's more conversations about health and nutrition and, her selling her protein powder than it is about being trans. But she does have discuss, a decent amount about her experience as a trans woman. And like, she's obviously not passing. This is a person who was formerly a professional male, at least male presenting wrestler. So a huge physical stature. So there's no way to pass, but it's just been a very interesting person to follow if you're interested in more of that conversation. Politically, I don't know. This could be, she could be fucking MAGA. I don't know. But I just think that's like one example. But there was other creators. This is not just an isolated incident. I've seen multiple trans women creators have this discussion. And then, as usual in this space, it is not just the trans women who have louder voice, it's white trans women, right? But when we think about the risk of violence in the trans community, we know that trans women of color are disproportionately affected by the violence that exists for just existing in the world as a trans woman. So again, I think that's very interesting. I also think the conversation about like ingrained, where she pointed out that cisgender women have a ton of ingrained misogyny, obviously one of my favorite topics, in the entire world. And so for trans women to try and say that they are above ingrained misogyny, especially when many were raised for, decades, like 2 decades, presenting and being treated as a male in society, to say that they do not have male programming or ingrained misogyny is fucking preposterous. It's preposterous. And furthermore, as far as like how a lot of trans women present, I think a really interesting conversation is that a lot of trans women, especially the ones who get the most attention, present as hyper feminine, right? And so I do think about sometimes I do feel like it is pushing women backwards in a way. And it's not pushing us backwards because they are trans, not at all. It's because their view of being a woman is more in the outside than in the inside. It's more in their outside appearance than in their soul, which is something we've been fighting against for decades. So it's just really like reprogramming society to be like, women must act hyper feminine, must wear skirts, must have big boobs, must have thin waist. Like you see that so much in a lot of the trans people who are at the forefront of this discussion. And I do think that it is damaging. And I think it's a very important conversation to have, and a conversation worthy of being had. And I don't think it's I mean, again, anyone progressive watching or who thinks of themselves as very progressive watching this would 100% call me a TERF. But this is, again, the creator that we just looked at the video, like, you're just not allowed to have these conversations. And as she stated, it is a way of effectively silencing people from having these conversations, because if these conversations aren't had, then, all these white trans women can continue moving forward unquestioned and in power. And again, it's one thing, for me to have the conversation, but to silence like a Black woman is even fucking crazier to me if we're talking about intersectional feminism. And so the last part of this conversation that I think I had, and I know it's weird that we haven't even watched any original content from Paris Mwendwa, but that's because she has apologized for turfiness. Again, the original video has been deleted, so I'm not actually sure. I think like it had to do with like lesbian lips calling her out for something, but I'm a little lost on that matter. But I think this still led to a good conversation. And again, one where I would be called a TERF, no doubt. Fine, whatever. Is I somehow ended up on Reddit /Black ladies. And I know that's problematic in and of itself. I shouldn't be here, but I'm not participating. I was just reading, because when I Googled Paris Mwendwa controversy, this really interesting thing came up from the Black ladies Reddit thread. And it said in its conversation that I've heard a lot in feminism, a lot, especially among like Black female comedians, being Black versus being a woman. And the person who wrote this is sufficient_food 1878, just to credit the writer. So she writes, Paris Mwendwa made a great point on TikTok about how people are extremely woke about everything until the word feminism arises. That has been stuck in my head recently, and I find it hard to phrase how I feel. White women have been centered so much in feminism discussions, it makes it so that other groups feel like they can't even claim to be feminists. And I think this is a brand problem, right? So if we want more people to be feminists, we want more people to be voting and working on legislation that, is feminist, we have to make sure that all women feel like a woman first before other things. And I don't think that's true of many people, women of color. I think many Black women feel like they are Black before they are a woman. And I feel like many Latino women feel like they are Latino. Like, I feel that is very, very common. And it's because white feminists have not made them feel welcome, and that's a brand fucking issue. It's beyond a brand issue, but it's an issue. It's why more people don't feel comfortable calling themselves feminists. I truly believe, I see Black women and other groups be much more tolerant. This was such an interesting point, towards casual misogyny, and laugh along with it than casual racism. Me too. And I especially obviously had a bird's eye view of this when I was living in Harlem for a decade, even though both do harm. I wonder if this is because a lot of us feel like focusing on feminism is a very white-centered thing. It's not just us who noticed it either. And then we get into James Charles, who I have zero respect for, but I'm going to read the thread as written. James Charles, when calling out a woman fired from Spirit Airlines for asking for donations, decided to call her a privileged white woman, even though she was not. Even when you argue about feminist issues online, the incels on there will tell you that you're using white woman tears, even though you are not a white woman. They are just weaponizing terms used by the Black community with completely different meanings and just using it for casual misogyny. Loving this point. I love spaces like this where we are actually able to discuss both being Black and women. And again, if you go in this, do not fucking comment anything unless you're a Black woman. I'm literally just looking at this because it was not I felt like I needed more perspectives from Black women, and just not, it's not a good look for just like a white woman to be like going on a diatribe, right? It feels like in real life, sometimes Black women aren't allowed to feel like women. It feels like in my community, at least, we must center Black issues first and shut up about the misogyny we face in our everyday lives. And that's a failure on feminism, because we didn't make it fucking welcoming for people. So that's a failure that Black women in Black communities feel like they have to shut up and just like swallow misogyny because they don't feel connected to the feminist space. That's a failing on our part. And in feminism spaces, we're not able to speak on the race aspect of anything either. I spoke to a friend about this and she agreed, but insisted that she'll only speak on Black issues for now because misogyny is for the white women, as that's the only issue that they have going on. I got pretty annoyed at this because I don't want them to be the face of all women's issues, and I want more Black women speaking up for ourselves and being feminists. I'm sorry, this post is such a mess, but yeah, no need. Well, it sounds like she's a millennial because she apologized at the end, but no need for apology. I thought that was a great point. And then there was a lot of comments on it, but one commenter recommended to this writer, to the OG poster, that they commented and they said, this book helped me find a lot of language to talk about this particular struggle. And then she links to a Wikipedia link to, it looks like a very old text where it's from 1982. Oh my God, it's not that old. It looks literally archaic. I'm from not that far after 1982. But the title of this book is All the Women Are White, All the Blacks Are Men, But Some of Us Are Brave. Obviously, the use of blacks is very 1982, but that's just the title of the book. And, I don't let like archaic language in old texts make you shy away from them. I think a lot of, older texts have a lot of great things to offer on viewpoints, perspective, timeline. And I know some of the language that they're going to use is going to kind of make you feel uncomfortable, but just get past that and put in, insert language that is more of the times. But you should be able to do that, no problem. So this is a book from, it says Black Women's Studies, and it's edited by Gloria T. Hull, Patricia Bell Scott, and Barbara Smith. So it's, and this book, it says, is a landmark feminist anthology in Black women's studies, printed in numerous editions. And then it says, edited, and Hull received the National Institute's Women of Color Award for contribution to this book. So if this is something you're interested in, definitely something I'm interested. If I wasn't already reading 2 books in unison, I think I especially love that it was recommended by a Black woman, not by a white woman. I know I'm now a white woman recommending it to you, but I'm literally, I'm just playing a game of telephone. I'm just the messenger. The original recommendation is from a Black woman, I promise you. All right. So that is our identity conversation today. I thought that was also interesting. And again, thank you as always. You guys bring me the most interesting topics, and I love the way your brains are working. If you want to send me something, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. Quick break to shout out to our Patreon subscribers. All hail to our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi. Shout out to my capitalist pigs and my cuties. Thank you so much for being here. And let's say hello to our newest cutie, Stephanie Marie. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to get on the Patreon and help contribute to making this show happen every week, and all the amazing people, Mike and Crystal and AJ, who work on the show, head over to patreon.com/withoutacountry, and you can get a membership to this show for as little as $6 a month. And that gets you an additional bonus video news story every single week. Again, for as little as $6 a month. And of course, there's like a messaging center there, so you can kind of like push your messages to the top of my inbox, although I do try to read everything. I don't like a pay to play system. All right, let's move on. Obviously, Mike wasn't with us last week, but he was very heated up about the Thomas Massie election loss. So I thought we could do a little girl dad corner and we could go over that. These are just articles I pulled. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything to start out the conversation, Michael, because I know you and I talked about it a bit last week.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this was the just the biggest story, certainly in my world. I mean, you know,
Right.
the record for most money ever spent in a United States congressional election, the unprecedented rise in voter turnout for this, you know, sleepy little district. If you look at like the last election versus this one, like what voter turnout looked like, and then specifically how Massie did among, you know, the Gen Zs, the millennials, the Gen Xers, and then how Ed Guerin pretty much only won boomers, and how it's like, for some reason, this country now for 70 years has been capitulating to the will of the boomers with seemingly no end in sight.
Right. And I mean, that's why, you know, especially when I was running for mayor and in the aftermath of that, as much corruption as I saw and as disheartened as I felt at times, the one major point, if there was any takeaway of me running for mayor, besides like, don't let people calling you crazy stop you from doing anything, except for maybe like jumping off a bridge or something. The one takeaway I really wanted to bring back to the listeners of this show, and, you know, just like, you know, Americans and people at large, is that voting really does still matter. It's why groups like AIPAC pour so much money into elections. Like, if there's any proof that like elections aren't fraudulent, it's like, well, if they were fraudulent, they wouldn't be giving the money to they would be giving the money to like tech companies and stuff. And so voting really does still matter. But I do feel like it's like the bare minimum that you have to do as a person. So again, you know, more ammo for Gen Z and millennials to get out and vote and not let boomers make these decisions for us.
Listen, maybe on the same time, it's
Maybe.
like, it's so disheartening for me, and like a you know, like an indictment on democracy
I
for, you
know.
know, somebody who was, you know, drummed out of the Navy, like was considered like, you know, an unwelcome hanger on at pretty much every station in his career, for him to oust the only guy who it seems like is actually putting the needs of the American people and his constituents before self-interest. It's disheartening to the point where, like, I mean, dude, look at the Ed Gallerin, like, you know, victory party versus the Thomas Massie concession speech party, and it's like, that tells me everything I need to know about what
Paint a
voting
picture
means.
for us. Paint a picture for us. I didn't see the
Oh, I
footage of
mean,
the party.
Massey's was, you know, it seemed like every single person in this district in Kentucky was in this same arena. Ed Gallerin came out to like 7 retirees sitting around with you know, warm shrimp cocktail, and
Well,
it's
because
like,
the people who voted for him are not people who are going to parties anymore.
Yeah, they're blue plate special and it's
Right.
at 5 p.m. Maybe,
Right.
but it's just like the
Right.
amount of people in one crowd versus the amount of people who passionately came out to support the other guy. It does make me question whether or not voting as an institution is just there to, like, you know, placate the masses. And it's like, well, yeah, we spent $34 million. Of course, this guy had to win. And it's like, that's pretty good cover for, you know, electing a guy who no one had ever heard of 3 months ago.
So what is your independent theory here? The Jews?
No, not necessarily. I mean, certainly it seems like that's the one who's spending a boatloads of money. I mean, entire countries' GDPs to win, you know, some congressional election in Connecticut. There was that fake tweet that was put out by Thomas Massie that said, you know, the referendum in Kentucky shows us that you can disagree with AIPAC for a little while. And it was like, well, that is not true. That certainly does seem to be the message that AIPAC was sending by pouring ungodly amounts of money into this congressional race. And it's like, I don't know if it was you can quote unquote put it on the Jews, because apparently Thomas Massie's number one donor is himself an Israeli man of Jewish descent who, you know, threw a lot of money at that campaign. So I don't know. I don't know who exactly to put the finger at, other than, you know, this establishment, well entrenched as it is, seems
Wait. Pause for a second. An Israeli man who lives in Israel and outside of America.
Listen. All I know is what I kept.
Because I'm like, we can't now come down on people just because they were born in Israel. They cannot help that. The fact that like if he was Israeli born and now lives in America, he can't change that.
Right. Look, all I know is like the you know, the certain trolling comments or you know, if you know, using my critical thinking skills, I would say, you know, the paid bot comments kept showing up under all these people who were so outraged over this hijacking of American democracy, with so many people saying, oh yeah, then why was Thomas Massie's top billionaire this Israeli dude or this Jewish dude, or, you know, whatever, you know, was coming up. So I don't know the full story behind that, but what I do know is that, you know, Thomas Massie is the only one. He was the one who authored I think it was called the Epstein Transparency Act or something along those lines. But like, you know, the only one who it seems is actually going out to, like, you know, do all the stuff that Trump promised on his campaign trail. No more wars and uncovering the corruption.
Okay, well, I think that because the piece that I chose, because I think it will be, you know, perhaps you'll be receptive to it, is a opinion piece from Al Jazeera. And it says, because there was two I was going between, there's a Slate piece called "The End of Thomas Massie is the Beginning of Something New. The Lawmakers' Resistance to a Trump-Backed Ouster Has Real Implications for the Future of the GOP." That one's a little bit more like, you know, what you would expect the article to be, and just like you know, but I think this maybe is more aligned with like a specific opinion. So it says Massie defeated the Israel lobby's Pyrrhic victory in Kentucky, and a Pyrrhic victory, just to go back to our vocabulary lessons, is a win that comes at such a steep price to the victor that it is functionally equivalent to a defeat, which also might speak to why the different, you know, concession versus victory parties were the way they were. This could also speak to that. So this says, the extraordinary campaigning to unseat Thomas Massie exposed a growing Republican backlash against pro-Israel political influence. This is by Saeed Araket, a Washington-based journalist. U.S. Representative Thomas Massie lost his Republican primary on Tuesday after one of the most expensive, and this is last Tuesday, and politically charged congressional campaigns in modern United States history. For the Israel lobby and its allies, the result marked a decisive victory. U.S. President Donald Trump deployed his political weight against Massie, endorsing his chosen challenger, Ed Galrin, and turning a local race into a national confrontation. You know, like Mike just pointed out, this is a small race turned into a huge nationwide discussion. At the same time, pro-Israel organizations and billionaire donors, including Miriam Adelson poured extraordinary sums into Kentucky to defeat a congressman whose offense was questioning military aid to Israel and challenging the expanding influence of pro-Israel lobbying power in Washington. Yet beneath the celebration lies a deeper and more troubling reality. The Kentucky race exposed a widening backlash among Americans increasingly uneasy with the scale of political influence exercised by organizations and donors aligned with a foreign state. What unfolded no longer resembled a conventional congressional primary. To many voters, the contest appeared less about Kentucky, less about conservative priorities, and less even about U.S. national interests than about enforcing ideological, again, it's an identity episode, conformity to Israel's political preferences and punishing dissent within the Republican Party. Punishing dissent is in many ways the MO of the entire Trump administration. So this is very aligned with what's happening. That perception may ultimately matter more than the result itself. For decades, support for Israel functioned in Washington as an almost untouchable consensus. Republicans and Democrats competed to demonstrate loyalty to the Israeli state, while organizations such as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which is AIPAC, built a vast influence apparatus through campaign finance, donor networks, think tanks, media access, and coordinated pressure. Criticism of Israeli policy risked donor retaliation, media isolation, and accusations of anti-Semitism. Fear, more than persuasion, maintained discipline. The Gaza war disrupted that framework. Millions of Americans were exposed daily to images of flattened neighborhoods, destroyed hospitals, starving civilians, and mass casualties circulating on social media. Whatever one's views on Hamas or Israeli security concerns, the scale of destruction reshaped public consciousness, especially among younger Americans who no longer accept narratives framing Israel primarily as a perpetual victim. Anyone who's a perpetual victim, I don't really believe, except Black people, but in America. But I don't think that I don't feel like the way they present is as a perpetual victim. But it's a group of people that I actually would be like fine with. Again, you know my thoughts both on a local level, if I was the head of New York City, or on a national level. The group of people that continuously gets fucking put push to the back, be like, oh, actually we have another problem that we got to handle first before we handle all the injustices that we have served to you since the start of this country. So again, that's how I fucking feel. It's actually crazy. Increasingly, they see Palestinians as a population living under occupation, blockade, and structural dispossession. That shift is no longer confined to progressive politics. It is spreading into conservative and libertarian spaces on the American right. Massie became politically dangerous precisely because he reflected that convergence. He is not a progressive anti-Zionist, but a libertarian conservative who opposes foreign intervention broadly and rejects foreign aid in principle, including aid to Israel. Even this limited dissent proved intolerable to powerful pro-Israel interests, which again is interesting because especially it's interesting that Trump hates him so, or worked against him because rejecting foreign aid in principle is actually isolated before you start talking about Israel specifically, is very much from the Trump handbook. I mean, look at all the aid that we pulled from, foreign aid that we pulled from like places like Africa that we had been giving for decades and decades and decades. So it seems like, oh, this is aligned, but why is the conversation not nationalist when it comes to Israel? Because MAGA overall has been very nationalist. The response was overwhelming. Tens of millions of dollars poured into Kentucky in a campaign designed not only to defeat Massie, but to make an example of him. Outside groups saturated the district with advertising portraying him as disloyal and extreme. Trump's intervention intensified the race, with the full machinery of the White House aligned behind Massie's opponent. In an extraordinary breach of norms, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth traveled to Kentucky the day before the vote to campaign personally for Gowrain, an unusual move for a sitting cabinet officer, and one taken against the backdrop of the ongoing U.S. military operation in Iran. But Trump's hostility towards Massie extended beyond Israel. The congressman had become, I go, you don't say, right? It's like, it's when it comes down to Trump, there's always something personal that's in the mix. The congressman had become one of the most persistent Republican voices demanding the release of, you guessed it, the Jeffrey Epstein files, pressing federal agencies and the administration for disclosure of records tied to the case. His insistence on transparency reportedly irritated Trump and parts of the Republican establishment, particularly as public suspicion surrounding elite protection networks continued to grow. The primary, therefore, became more than an electoral contest. It became a warning that dissent, whether on Israel, foreign aid, or politically sensitive domestic scandals, would carry consequences. While Massie ultimately lost by roughly 9 percentage points, pre-election polling pointed to a sharp generational split, like Mike just talked about, with surveys showing him drawing the bulk of his support from Republican voters under 40 and trailing badly among those over 60. The pattern underscores a generational divide, reshaping conservative attitudes towards Israel, foreign policy, and lobbying influence in U.S. politics. Yet the intensity of the campaign produced unintended effects. Many voters began asking why such extraordinary sums linked to Israeli interests were dominating a local U.S. election. Across conservative media, podcasts, and online forums, frustration deepened over what appeared to be disproportionate foreign-aligned influence inside domestic politics. The debate expanded beyond Massie to the broader role of AIPAC and affiliated networks in the U.S. political system. Calls intensified for AIPAC to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA. Critics argued that organizations closely aligned with a foreign government's strategic interests should face transparency requirements applied to other foreign influence actors. I mean, if you guys remember, I know there's a lot of international fans who listen to GWF or this show and who follow me. And one of the biggest conversations that we had when I was running for mayor was, you guys were so generous, and so many of you who live abroad were like, I want to donate. You're trying to donate. Some of you even somehow got past like like basically gates that we had in place so that foreign entities couldn't donate, and we had to then refund you because it is illegal. Foreign, people who, if you're not American, you can't donate, at least to the mayoral race. And so, this is like one of the core rules of, the campaign finance board in New York City. Again, things are different everywhere. But I just find this so interesting when we're talking. It's like, yeah, obviously foreign entities shouldn't be involved in domestic elections, whether or not, like, weird to even have the conversation, whether or not such arguments prevail legally. Their entry into mainstream conservative discourse reflects a significant political shift. Only a few years ago, such claims remained marginal. Today, they are increasingly part of the political mainstream. That normalization represents a far greater concern for Israel's defenders than any single electoral victory. The danger for the lobby was never Massie alone. It was the possibility that other Republicans might observe his challenge and conclude that dissent on Israel was politically survivable. Highlight that sentence 15 times. Even in defeat, Massie demonstrated that significant portions of the Republican electorate are increasingly willing to question unconditional support for Israel and the scale of U.S. foreign aid commitments. The Kentucky race also revealed contradictions within Trump's America First coalition. Many nationalist conservatives now openly question why the defense of Israeli interests continues to enjoy near sacrosanct status while domestic economic pressures intensify. Increasingly, populist voices frame large aid packages to Israel as inconsistent with U.S. sovereignty and national renewal. This does not reflect hostility towards Jewish Americans. Rather, it reflects fatigue with foreign entanglements. There's a lot of hostility towards Jewish Americans. Again, this is from Al Jazeera, so everything has bias, but there's hostility. Rather, it reflects fatigue with foreign entanglements, donor-driven politics, and the perception that criticism of Israeli policy is uniquely constrained in U.S. public life. for now, the Israel lobby retains enormous institutional power. But I will, what I will say is there ain't no one giving worse press to Israel than it like Israel lobby, Israel itself, all these, AIPAC, a lot of these Jewish organizations, unfortunately, are doing shit that is making it so much harder for Jewish Americans, certainly. Today's result confirmed that clearly, but political systems often become most aggressive precisely when they sense underlying instability. Massie lost his seat, Trump and pro-Israel organizations. And I think this might be specific still to like whatever neck of the woods you are in, because especially like in the Northeast, we're going to see, and we already see it in different races that are happening, like with the Jack Schlossberg congressional race that's happening here in New York. A lot of talk about Israel, his stance on Israel, his previous stance on Israel was coming out today because he was the front runner. But then there was this like street interview he did. I think the street interview was with Crackhead Barney, if I'm not mistaken. Mike, you know Crackhead Barney, right? Crackhead Barney has been on.
Oh, yeah.
Has been on, because is that right? Did you see that street interview with Jack Schlossberg? It was with Crackhead Barney, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. It was that was the one where it's like, are you a real Kennedy?
Right. And then and basically she wanted him to say like free Palestine or one of these,
Yes.
kind of things, and he refused to say it. And basically then everyone absolutely turned on him, because of that. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see. Again, it was a big point in the New York City mayoral race, but like if you are running progressive, at least, and now it's, we even see it bleeding into the Republican space, but if you are running on the left and you are not willing to go full on out pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, anti-AIPAC, I don't think, we're just going to see more people going to the ground. Again, another instance where support of AIPAC is absolutely ruining someone who was the toast of the town, a year or two ago, is Jasmine Crockett. This is, there's stuff going on with her in not endorsing Cori Bush and yet endorsing someone else. And everyone's like, she's sold out to AIPAC. So again, this is a conversation we're going to see again and again and again. As I told you, I knew that Israel and Palestine was going to be just like the head of every political campaign. I knew that at the beginning in January of 2025, that was crystal clear. So it should be even more crystal clear now. All right, back to this article. Massie lost his seat. Trump and pro-Israel organizations secured a major victory, yet the race left behind a more difficult legacy. Growing public resentment among Americans who believe elections are shaped by billionaire donors. They largely are, but they don't have to be, right? And ideological pressures linked to a foreign state. It is possible for grassroots to work, but that means that, when you think about billionaire donors and like, yes, so that means like, if we're going to fight the billionaires, we all have to come together and we all got to donate $10 and we all got to go out there and vote and, do a little bit of canvassing or something. And I know that many of you stated that the first political campaign that you donated to was mine. And I hope that, that has inspired you to throw $10 or $15 or $20 to other campaigns that you agree with. And again, even if people are running against each other, I want you to get out of the headspace of like, you can only like one candidate. I think there was lots of people in New York who like both me and Zoran. And again, obviously I wanted to make them like me more than Zoran, but I think that we are so starved for good candidates that many voters have this thought in their head that like if one person is running and another good person runs the race, they go, why are you doing that? And that is a terrible mentality. We should have our pick of multiple good candidates in every single race in this country. That is my dream, and that is my wish. That is my hope for America. And to me, it is almost like the behavior of abused people. And I do think of the American voters as abused people because we all have been abused by the government. And it is an abused person's perspective to think that there's only enough. We only have enough for there to be one good candidate. And if there's multiple good candidates, then they'll cancel each other out. No, what we should be doing is making sure that bad candidates don't run and that we really have this democratic choice of not like the lesser of many evils, but truly multiple good choices who can fill the seat that we are looking to fill in this country. That's my have a dream speech, right? That sentiment, back to the article, that sentiment will not dissipate with the campaign's end. Once voters begin questioning who shapes U.S. politics, the longstanding insulation enjoyed by Israel's defenders may erode faster than Washington expects. And then there's a note: the views expressed in this article are the author's own and do not necessarily reflect Al Jazeera's editorial stance. Of course, we know it's an op-ed. You guys are smart. If you're watching this show, we fucking know that, but always good to point out. All right. Now, moving on to some main stories for today, and I picked a couple things to be the main stories that I thought were interesting, and also looking into what people click on YouTube. It's good to throw a famous person's name in there. Sadly, again, just being transparent with you all, but I feel like this again is not a surprise. We kind of knew something like this was coming. This is this administration's MO, but Hasan Piker has been subpoenaed. Hasan Piker, my longtime friend. No, just kidding. I almost feel like, I even though, when I looked at his stuff on my own, I wasn't like a big fan of Hasan Piker. Now that everyone, fears Hasan Piker and they're trying to silence him, I was like, no, I gotta defend Hasan Piker, but I do, to a certain extent. Okay, so this is from USA Today by Finch Walker. Hasan Piker subpoenaed by U.S. government a month after event with PA Representative Lee. This is from today, May 27th. Oh boy. And there's an AI overview. Jesus Christ. I notice now on like CNN and stuff, like you can actually, Matthew says, I love Crackhead Barney. Crackhead Barney is a New York City staple. And then Lydia says, Cori Bush doesn't have a great reputation in St. Louis. Oh, that's interesting. I would love to hear more about that. If you want to, put it in the comments or shoot me an email or something about that, or send an article from like a local St. Louis media outlet that you really like that maybe talks about that. I'd be very interested in that. Because again, like locally, it's so hard to follow every single race. And even when you're doing like, I have to really like push Google or the algorithm to even give me local outlets as news sources. Cause obviously I don't know the name of everyone's local news source. And I'm like digging for, more local government stories. And a lot of times it just continuously feeds me ones from the Northeast. And I'm like, no, I want them from everywhere. I did follow Cori Bush on Instagram. I thought I had, but I guess I had unfollowed at one point because I follow so many politicians, but I refollowed her and to follow that a little bit more closely, because it's like, I am not going to just like blindly like Jasmine Crockett to like Jasmine Crockett, but it is breaking my heart because for a good chunk of time there, she was my favorite politician. Now the reigning crown is given to AOC, who, unlike so many politicians, the more she stays an elected official, the more I like her, which I think is wildly impressive. I think, I think like when she went in, she kind of like didn't exactly know what she was doing, but she had an idea and she just followed it, which really aligns with my thought that like, if you are a person with a vision and you are living in this country and you know the needs of the people, you can fucking figure it out. Again, these people are dumb as hell. Two things to remember. You need to vote, and the people who are in charge of some of the most important aspects of our life are truly the dumbest, least creative people I've ever met in my entire life. And so to turn your nose up at, an artist, a stand-up comedian, or even like someone like Jack Schlossberg. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a Jack Schlossberg supporter. Again, I find him highly annoying, and before he was running for office I had to unfollow him because he was driving me fucking crazy on Instagram. But to think that people are like don't have like the background to fill these roles is insane. Like my problem with Spencer Pratt running for mayor of LA is it's honestly not that he's a reality TV star. If he was a reality TV star who then went into, a lot of activism, I'd have absolutely no problem with that. My problem is the only activism he's ever participated in is completely self-serving, and similar to the Trump administration, he has a personal fucking vendetta against Karen Bass. And so he's like, I'm going to run for mayor. And that is not, and I'm going to sign, and he signed a reality TV show deal, if you didn't even, know that. And it's going to continue following him if he runs for mayor, which I got to look into the legality of that. That should be fucking illegal, first of all. Unless it's for some kind of government archives, not for a streaming service. And then another point that I wanted to bring up is just because I'm, this race is, a week away at this point, the primaries. But, in LA, it works differently. And if he takes more than half, there is no general election. This just takes it. Another tell for me that Spencer Pratt is not to be trusted is that when you say something negative about Spencer Pratt on social media, or when you say something positive about Nithya Raman, which is something I did this week. I think I also said like Spencer Pratt is dangerous because Nithya Raman appeared on Trash Tuesday, which is Esther Pavitsky and Kalila's podcast in Los Angeles. Two female. Well, Kalila's not a comedian, but she's a personality, and I love them both. And I'm so happy because that's not really a super politically charged podcast. And I was really so happy that they had Nithya Raman on because they have a reach to a lot of young people who need to show up to the polls in Los Angeles, and it just made me so happy. And I just commented like, "Oh my God, thank you guys so much for having her on." Obviously, like I'm in New York, but it just like really made me happy. That my peers are getting involved in a mayoral race in their own city when the stakes are so high. And I didn't even start engaging in this, but the comments that I had were so like charged, and they had such like visceral, like not visceral. They were just so angry and hateful, and it just reminded me of like MAGA, at its worst, at its most powerful, all over again. And to me, if you have to be so angry and so filled with vitriol, which is the word that I meant to say before, so filled with vitriol when someone even expresses concern about a specific candidate, like that's very weird. To blindly believe that Spencer Pratt is going to be an amazing mayor with him having never served publicly before is wild. And I would say the same thing about me. Like there was no reason for people to blindly trust that I would be a good mayor. There's no reason that people should have blindly trusted that Zohran Mamdani would be a good mayor because you just don't know yet, right? And so I think with any elected official who we don't have information on what their leadership looks like in like when they are elected and when they are in office, sitting in office, I think like, yeah, you can be excited about someone. You can be excited about what you think they're going to bring to the table, but to like blindly cult-like follow any candidate, whether it's a candidate I like or a candidate I don't like, is fucking crazy. And you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. All right, back to this article. A little more than a month after he appeared at a campaign event in Michigan with Congresswoman Summer Lee, Democrat from Pennsylvania, leftist Twitch streamer Hasan Piker was subpoenaed by the U.S. Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control over his March trip to Cuba, according to multiple reports. Piker, who goes by Hassan Abi on the streaming platform Twitch, where he has 3.1 million followers, was subpoenaed alongside Medea Benjamin, co-founder of the feminist anti-war nonprofit Code Pink, Women for Peace, according to a May 23rd report from Fox News. On a May 23rd X post of the outlet's article, Piker slammed the move. The American government would rather try to criminalize delivering aid to a country we've starved than punish the Epstein class, he said. The report came a little more than a month after the Los Angeles-based streamer appeared alongside Lee and a number of other speakers at a campaign event for U.S. Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed at University of Michigan, whose campaign I have donated to. That's public information, I believe. My neighbors had a little fundraiser for him, and I couldn't go because I was working, but I said, sure. I like what this person's up to. Lee's appearance with Piker drew backlash from her Jewish colleagues and Stand With Us, a pro-Israel advocacy organization, with all condemning Piker as anti-Semitic. But the thing for me is, even if Piker is anti-Semitic, which is a conversation for another day, conversation we've had a little bit on here, when you're running for office And Abdul El Said talks about this, which I think is great. I've seen him talk about this before, is like, yeah, obviously sometimes you're going to appear with people whose opinions you don't fully agree. Whose opinions can you sit down with and say, point for point, I 100% agree with all of this person's thoughts and all of this person's stances. If you are running for office, you gotta break bread with people that you disagree with, because ultimately, if elected, you are going to be representing all of them. And to win, you have to go into spaces that aren't echo chambers. Talking with someone on a podcast, sitting across from someone on a podcast, is not co-signing all their beliefs. How many people have I had on this podcast that I vehemently disagree with? How many comedy podcasts have I sat down with where I think, the hosts have heinous points of view? It is about getting, perspectives out to people who, unless you appeared on the show that they listen to, aren't going to fucking hear you at all. And, maybe you can convince them of one point, under your umbrella of thoughts and the way you see the world. And we can all share ideas with each other. It's crazy. Lee was elected, and again, it's just so like condemning candidates for appearing on on platforms where the party or whatever doesn't fully agree with the host is just like, that's just a recipe for losing. Lee was elected in 2022 to Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district, which covers a large part of Pittsburgh, including Squirrel Hill, a historically Jewish community. She won the Democratic Party for the primary for the seat on May 19th, beating challenger William Parker. And then it goes on to describe who Hasan Piker is, but you guys know who Hasan Piker is. So we can go past that. But despite report, Piker and Benjamin say that they have not received the subpoenas. While Fox News reported on May 23rd that Piker and Benjamin had both received subpoenas seeking financial, logistical, and communications information about humanitarian trips both made to Cuba with Nostra America convoy in March, Piker said on May 24th that he hadn't gotten a subpoena. Mike, can you actually look into an update? This was like more coming up, like if he has said publicly that he's received it yet. He's also said during a Twitch live stream the same day that the trip had been cleared with the Office of Foreign Assets Control beforehand, HuffPost reported. Benjamin also told HuffPost that she had not been served a subpoena as of May 24th. And like, just legally for you guys to know, like they could have been subpoenaed, but like you have to be served, which, it has to be handed to you. Like we saw happen to the MyPillow guy on TV. And Alfred. No, maybe no crotch licking on the stream. This is Alfred's OnlyFans. Lee and Piker appeared together in April ahead of the primary election. Come here, buddy. On April 7th, University of Michigan hosted a campaign rally for El Said, drawing about 500 students, while online viewers watched via a Twitch live stream, according to the Michigan Daily. Speakers included Piker, Lee, Representative Rashida Tlaib, Amir Makled, a University of Michigan Board of Regents candidate, Ann Arbor mayoral candidate Youssef Rabi, and LSA sophomore Summit Luth University's Central Student Government president. During a rally, Lee emphasized the importance of voters' collective power, which I agree. Right now, I'm not asking you to believe in us, Lee said. I'm asking you to vote for us, but I am saying that I need you to believe in you. I need you to believe in how powerful we are as a collective. Love. PA officials, pro-Israel advocacy organization, lambast Lee's appearance with Piker. State Representative Dan Frankel and State Senator Judy Schwenk, both Democrats from Pennsylvania, co-chairs of the PA Legislative Jewish Caucus, released a statement together condemning Lee's appearance with Piker, saying Piker has repeatedly trafficked in anti-Semitic statements. Okay, that's kind of honestly neither here nor there when you're running for office. At a time, it's like the candidate hasn't been anti-Semitic. At a time when Jewish communities are facing rising threats and harassment, public officials have an obligation to be unequivocal about the voices they elevate and the company they keep. I mean, good luck being in office then, because you're going to have to, you're going to have to be around people that you think are dastardly. They said in the April 6th, and again, it's like, this is so against, everyone, when Zoran went in and charmed Trump's pants off, everyone fucking ate that up. Nom, 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 like, so what the fuck? This is just like, we're compartmentalizing here. They said in the April 6th statement posted to X, 2 years ago, Representative Lee agreed to withdraw from a fundraising event that would have placed her on stage with speakers known for extremist and anti-Semitic rhetoric. It is not too late to make that same choice again, refusing to legitimize intolerance. Following the event, Stand With Us lambasted Lee for appearing with Piker in a lengthy statement posted to their website. At a time when anti-Semitism is rising to record levels, it has never been more important for our elected officials to take a firm stance against any figures who may be promoting or amplifying anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist messaging. Please don't use that in the same sentence. Said Stand With Us.
May 23rd, he was allegedly subpoenaed.
No, I know. Well, no, I know that. But has he acknowledged that he actually was served this subpoena yet?
Well, it says that he was. This is saying he was reportedly served with a subpoena. So it seems that he.
But he's saying publicly that he has not received it.
This is also saying it's technically an Office of Foreign Assets Control (OFAC) request for information. So it's not. I guess it's technically not a subpoena. So I don't know if that has the same rules, like it needs to be delivered in person or not.
Interesting. Well, because they use the word served, which is that's the only legal understanding I have of that, unless I am not like to be served.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken $20 from a process server to go, hand it to a guy and probably present him with the worst news of his life. But
I mean, Mike, put a pin in that, because that is a documentary short I want to make. Representative Summerlee's decision to campaign alongside Piker sends a message to her constituents that she does not represent all of us. Well, yes, but I disagree with this, right? Because when you're representing a group of people, you're going to need to represent people who listen to Hasan Piker. You're going to need to represent anti-Semites. You're going to need so yes, she does represent everyone. Like, that's like the whole fucking point. So when you're running for office, a specific seat, like, you're going to represent people who are Zionists, and you're going to represent people who are anti-Zionists. You're going to represent Semites, and you're going to represent anti-Semites. That's what holding a seat is. Like, okay. In her role as a leader in Congress, she has a responsibility to represent her Jewish, Zionist, and Israeli constituents. Yes, just as she would any others. Yes. So the any others are the people who listen to Hasan Piker. What part of this are we not understanding? Lee defends appearance, says she remains unequivocal in condemning hate. Lee defended appearing alongside Piker in a statement to City and State, Pennsylvania, ahead of the event, at a moment when Donald Trump is threatening catastrophic violence against Iran and saying a whole civilization will die tonight. Our priorities are deeply out of step if this is what some choose to focus on, she said. We need to invite young people in, take them seriously, and recognize that our politics are strongest when everyday people have a real hand in shaping them. She added that she would continue showing up to speak with young people about the issues defining their lives and futures, and I will continue to be unequivocal in condemning Islamophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, and all forms of hate. Okay, good. If reporters have questions about Hasan Piker's statements, they should ask Hasan Piker. Yes, I'm focused on reaching young people and bringing more people into a democratic process that too often pushes them away. Yes. In 2024, Lee backed out of an engagement with a Muslim group following backlash regarding other speakers' anti-Semitic and homophobic comments, according to Politico. So maybe she's learned from that, because she shouldn't have backed out of that one either. Again, just because you share a stage with someone does not mean you are co-signing on their point of fucking view. Otherwise, I would never be able to do any comedy show for the rest of my fucking life, because I'm sharing a stage with those other comics, and rest assured, I do not share their viewpoints. I wanted to join this event with other members of Congress and elected officials to support our Muslim neighbors in the Commonwealth, and elected officials to support our, in the Commonwealth and across the country, who are desperate to be heard by their own elected officials and feel supported at a time of rising anti-Muslim hate and violence. She said, I do not condone or endorse any of the other speakers' previous comments. Love, great. Sounds like a great representative to have. Again, just based on her, stance on handling that situation, I have to look into her policies more to actually co-sign on her policies. All right. Next story we want to get into is I had been following this. Tony Carruthers was on death row, right? And this is yet, file under, I can't believe we're still doing capital punishment. And this is one of my absolute favorite topics. And because of this botched execution, and when I say botched execution, I mean they literally couldn't find a vein that worked. And there's like 13 holes in this guy's fucking arm. And they put a pin in it for a year from now because they weren't able to kill him. Just like so traumatic on so many different levels. But again, this has reignited a conversation that gets reignited every time someone is sent or attempted to be sent to death row or sitting on death row in that, I can't believe we're still doing capital punishment. And this one is really interesting because, well, the crimes he has been convicted of are quite heinous. So it's very interesting. So first piece I'm going to talk about is from Democracy Now! And this is from May 26th, which is yesterday. He was in agony. Tennessee issues 1-year stay for Tony Carruthers after botched execution attempt. Tennessee death row prisoner Tony Carruthers was issued a 1-year stay of execution last Thursday after prison officials were unable to find a backup injection vein in a botched execution attempt that left Carruthers suffering and in pain for over an hour. Nashville reporter Stephen Hale attended the execution and describes his and fellow witnesses' confusion as they heard the sounds of what Carruthers' attorneys are calling torture. And again, when you hear what he was convicted of, you're going to be like, I don't really care, probably. But there's a lot of other. This is messy. This whole thing seems very messy. Per Tennessee's lethal injection protocol, witnesses can only see inside the execution chamber once the injection process has begun. Classy. Carruthers, who has long struggled with mental health issues and represented himself in his trial, was convicted of triple homicide in 1996. He has always maintained his innocence, but courts have thus far blocked his requests for modern-day crime scene analysis, which is so important, especially if you've watched things like the yogurt shop murders, which for those of you following it, my mom put me to this, but they solved the yogurt shop murders. If you had been following that on HBO, I believe it was, and there's a new episode up now where they explain how they solved that case, and it's very interesting. And there's a lot of mistakes that were made and a lot of additional lives ruined besides the people who were murdered in that gruesome scene. And a lot of this is, DNA and technological advancements change. And so if people are on, death row for all this time, a lot of things do change, right? That could lead to his exoneration. Tennessee resumed capital punishment last year. You guys know how I feel about that. Following a 3-year moratorium put in place to review the state's lethal injection protocols. Obviously needs a little more looking at. Since its resumption, 3 people have been executed by the state, all by lethal injection. Carruthers would have been the 4th. And then there's like a conversation back and forth with. We're not going to read this. I'm going to move on to the second article because I hate reading conversations on this show. That is not my favorite type of format to do. And so I'm going to move on to this other article from ballsandstrikes.org, which I thought gave a little bit more detail into this. This is brought to you by Demand Justice. And just because we haven't, I don't think, shared anything from Balls and Strikes before, Balls and Strikes publishes original commentary and reporting about courts, the judges who preside over them, and the legal system they uphold. So this is like a specifically legal news and commentary I would categorize this with. So Tony Carruthers was forced to represent himself at trial, which in my opinion should be like forced self-representation should be illegal. Like, I guess if you want to represent yourself, that should be fine. but you know, and I know, like they say, like, you know, if you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you, but it gets murky. And Tennessee is about to execute him. So this was from May 14th, right before the botching went down. And so I think this paints a more interesting picture of just the multiple problems that were going on with this, because I obviously, you know, follow things like the Innocence Project, and you know, and sometimes it's not even people saying that these people are 100% innocent. The Innocence Project sometimes speaks to people who they feel like never got the fair trial that they deserved, and I feel like that is just a big of a problem as any. And again, I know we talked about that in regards to Mackenzie Shirilla last week, and that really agitated some of you, man. And it's also interesting because I notice that the people who seem to hate Mackenzie Shirilla the most and are be the most outspoken against her are other women. Just put a pin in that. Okay, I'm putting pins in lots of stuff. I have an imaginary cork board next to me right now. I'm just putting pins in a lot of things. You know, just think about that. I don't know why. That's interesting to me. And why are all the people who are helping Luigi Mangione and standing outside his why are no men there? Men certainly seem to like what Luigi Mangione did, but why are only women out? It's just very interesting. Okay, so in the years since his 1996 conviction, this is by Sophia Lorenzi, the state's case against Carruthers has collapsed, but courts have repeatedly rejected his requests for a new trial, leaving him with no recourse. And he is a Black man. And again, in our identity episode, it is important to know that, you know, because who's getting fucked over more by the legal system. On May 21st, Tennessee is scheduled to execute Tony Carruthers. And we now know that it did not go as planned, and it could save his life for, you know, forever, and exonerate him, who in 1996 was convicted, and buckle your seatbelt because this is going to be bad, and sentenced to death for the kidnapping and murder of 21-year-old Marcellos Anderson, Anderson's mother, Deloise, and Anderson's friend, Frederick Tucker. The case made headlines at the time because of the horrifying nature of the deaths. The three bodies were discovered buried underneath a recently interred casket in a Memphis cemetery, and at Carruthers' trial, the medical examiner stated that the victims had still been alive when they were buried. So again, buried alive, truly an Edgar Allan Poe level fucking nightmare. I mean, you know, I've read a lot of cases, you know, recently about people, you know, their bodies were burned. They were burned alive. I feel like burned alive and buried alive, two of the worst ways to go if we're just talking about the absolute depths of human on human cruelty. Whew, okay. Prosecutors relied on this aggravating factor that the murders were especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel when they sought the death penalty. But the case against Carruthers was riddled with issues from the start. For one, no physical evidence ever linked him to the crime. The state relied on the dubious story of a jailhouse snitch to get a grand jury to indict Carruthers for the murders. And most egregiously, due largely to a schizoaffective disorder that plagued Carruthers for years, the trial judge rescinded his Sixth Amendment right to counsel, forcing Carruthers to represent himself at his own death penalty trial. Right there, we should stop. And this is the person who shouldn't be on death row. Again, I don't care how heinous the crime that you are accused of is. Everyone in America deserves a fair trial. I can't believe how many people push back on that, to me, simplistic point that I am making when I say that. If you are someone who believes that everyone doesn't deserve a fair trial, email me, withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. I would really love to hear your perspective on that, because that is so un-American. Carruthers' self-representation was just the beginning of a long, shocking path through the criminal legal system. Absent executive clemency from Republican Governor Bill Lee or intervention from the U.S. Supreme Court, that path will end later this month with the execution of a man who is certainly mentally ill, whose conviction is tainted by serious deprivations of his constitutional rights, and who may be innocent of the murders that put him on death row in the first place. From the time he was arrested, Carruthers exhibited paranoid delusions about his attorneys. He suspected multiple lawyers of conspiring with the prosecution against him, and believed that another was neglecting his case in an effort to start a homosexual relationship with him, and that still another was harboring a secret cocaine addiction. After Carruthers had been through 6 attorneys, the presiding judge, Joseph Daly, grew tired of what he viewed as Carruthers' attempts to delay the trial. Daly ordered Carruthers to represent himself. So again, if you're reading that correctly, they just got impatient. They were just like, you know what? I'm just sick of this bullshit, and you just have to represent yourself. Again, that's against his constitutional right. But okay, it's literally when they read you your rights. If you don't have, an attorney, I don't know that, but if you don't have an attorney, one will be provided for you. That's in your fucking rights that are read to you. I feel like everyone, I feel like what the thing, add it to the list of things that we should, go over in school are like Miranda rights refreshers. Again, so like just as a refresher, the things that are going that you're going to be read in your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I feel like we all know those two parts. Part 3, you have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you are being questioned. Is that the exact language? No, I was like, there's no him in it, because I was like, this is an AI redoing of it. Okay, so you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. 3, you have the right to an attorney. 4, if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. 5, if you decide to answer questions now without an attorney present, you will still have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to an attorney, right? And then they're supposed to ask you, do you understand the rights I have just read to you? With these rights in mind, do you wish to speak to me, kind of a thing. But I feel like, again, we all know the first 2 points, but you absolutely should be able to have an attorney. And if you are not an attorney yourself and think that you can navigate the legal system, you're out of your damn mind. But also there's a lot of bad lawyers out there. So, the attorney you're going to get, if you don't have money for an attorney, in some cases, you might be better off representing yourself, but I would say probably not if you're possibly schizophrenic. But if you're schizophrenic, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't have that logic to figure that out. Okay, so we're at the point where Carruthers is now forced to represent himself. Carruthers pleaded for another lawyer. He apologized to his most recent attorney, who, once he realized Carruthers would have to defend his case alone, begged the judge to let him return. But Daly proceeded in part as a sanction for Carruthers' misconduct. So again, people in positions of power often love to wield that power, and that's exactly what happened here. He said, no, this person has misbehaved. Classic, infantilization of, Black people in America. I think that Black people and women share that, an infantilization, I'm going to say. And and so his punishment for his misconduct, which was like not making a decision fast enough, or being too picky with the attorney who is going to be the difference between life and death for this guy, is that he has to now represent himself. Fucking crazy. Carruthers did not have the education, training, or competence to argue a criminal case, let alone one in which his life was at stake. When his trial began, he was a 28-year-old with an extensive family history of schizophrenia, who had been in and out of detention and jail since he was 14, as he dealt with drug addiction and manic episodes. Throughout the trial, jurors expressed that they were both confused and offended by Carruthers' erratic behavior. He obsessively repeated the same questions to witnesses, for example, and pulled at his groin while standing in front of the jury. From the beginning, Carruthers stumbled through the substance of his defense. He called the prosecution's jailhouse snitch to the stand, a man named Alfredo Shaw, whose testimony had plenty of problems. For one thing, Shaw told the grand jury that Carruthers had confessed to him when they were both in jail, even though the jail had orders to keep them in separate units after a previous disagreement. For another, Shaw described a three-way phone call with Carruthers and a set of twin brothers in which the three of them, Carruthers and the brothers, asked Shaw to take part in this murder. But Carruthers was in jail at the time of the supposed phone call, and contraband cell phones that would have enabled three-way calling did not exist at the time. The prosecution never charged the twins who Shaw claimed were planning the murder, and Shaw later told local news that the state had paid him for his testimony. The prosecution branded Shaw a liar and decided not to have him testify at trial at all. But Carruthers believed that he could get the entire case thrown out if only he could prove that Shaw had lied. Thus, Carruthers decided to question Shaw in what Carruthers' appellate attorneys have described as a singularly inept, ineffective, and disastrous, and that's all in quotes, cross-examination that seemed designed to secure not only a guilty verdict, but a death sentence. Daly, the judge, did not allow Carruthers to question Shaw on whether he had been a paid informant, and the prosecution threatened to arrest Shaw for perjury if he repeated his statements to the media. Thus, on the stand, Shaw simply reverted to his old story, which he recounted to the jury, but stripped of all the details that undermined it. This is so crazy. In April 1996, the jury found both Carruthers and his co-defendant, James Montgomery, guilty and sentenced both men to death. But unlike Carruthers, Montgomery had a lawyer, and on appeal, Montgomery's lawyer argued that Carruthers' attempts at lawyering for himself were so prejudicial that Montgomery should receive a new trial. The Tennessee Supreme Court agreed, writing that Montgomery was severely prejudiced by Carruthers' actions at trial, including his offensive mannerisms before the jury, his questioning of witnesses that elicited incriminating evidence, and most importantly, his calling Alfredo Shaw to testify as a witness. Before Montgomery could get that new trial, though, the medical examiner who testified for the state recanted a key aspect of his earlier testimony, stating in an affidavit that he no longer believed the victims had been buried alive. In fact, another pathologist had reviewed the evidence before the original trial at the judge's request and determined then that the victims had not been buried alive, which, is important, not because, it would have made them, but because that horrific point was something that really played to people's emotions, right? And on purpose, when we're talking about the prosecution. He could have testified to this at trial, but Carruthers, acting as his own attorney, never called this pathologist to testify. With their star witness recanting and the most shocking aspect of the murders dismantled, prosecutors decided not to retry James Montgomery at all. Instead, they offered him a plea deal of 27 years. Montgomery was released from prison in 2016. Meanwhile, which is so crazy, 10 years ago, we're still talking about it. It's 2026 now. Meanwhile, so Love is a Battlefield says court-appointed lawyers basically railroad people into a conviction. I mean, is that just, think about it. They work with the judge every day. What do they care about some schizo? Okay, I would have worded that differently, but I appreciate your insight. I mean, that's an opinion, right? I also think that there are I think that's like while I'm certainly acknowledge that judges and lawyers can be quite corrupt. And I certainly last year had my own personal one-on-one experience with corrupt judges, because they work with the Board of Elections in New York City every year. And that's exactly kind of the point that my lawyer brought up with me. They were like, the judges aren't going to care about you because they're probably never going to see you again. Whereas they're going to deal with the representatives from the Board of Elections every single year, which is going to have a bias on their ruling. So in that case, I see what the point you're making, but I think it's an unfair broad statement to make about attorneys in general that they're all without ethics. I think certainly there are many attorneys out there who truly got into the work because they have like a love for the law. And I think those attorneys are sometimes assigned to people. And I think it's unfair to say that they're all just like trying to make you get convicted. I think unfortunately sometimes It's just like the lawyers that you're paying, hundreds of thousands of dollars to have access to things because of the budget that other lawyers don't have access to. Alfred sitting over there. So meanwhile, Carruthers faced an uphill battle appealing his conviction. In Tennessee, I'm pretty impressed with Carruthers that he got this far, if he is in fact schizophrenic, as they're saying. Like, I don't think many people without schizophrenia could have even gotten this far, even though he did a bad job. In Tennessee, inmates on death row are automatically appointed attorneys to assist with their appeals, though Carruthers, who refused to submit to mental health evaluations, suspected that these attorneys were also working with the prosecution. He did not fire them. So that's speaking to, some of your corruption accusations for sure in this specific case. But again, I don't, to make a broad statement, I don't know. I feel like it's offensive to some people in pursuit of true justice. These attorneys, like Kim Kardashian, these attorneys made repeated formal requests to the Shelby County District Attorney, the prosecutor's office, that he had tried Carruthers for information about whether Shaw had been a paid informant. Each time, the office, which has garnered national scrutiny for withholding evidence from defendants that could be helpful to proving their innocence, denied knowledge one way or the other. Finally, in 2024, soon after Shelby County elected a reform-minded prosecutor, the Memphis Police Department shared Shaw's file with Carruthers' defense team. It detailed confidential agreements and payment records between Shaw and law enforcement that spanned decades, including during the time of Carruthers' trial, evidence that Carruthers could have offered to undermine Shaw's credibility. Between the revelations from Montgomery's and Carruthers' appeals processes, the key components of the state's original case against Carruthers have collapsed. And in 2010, Montgomery stated that Carruthers wasn't involved in the murders at all. Again, no physical evidence connected Carruthers to the crime. And according to Montgomery, it was another man, Ronnie Irving, who had committed the crimes with him. The ACLU has requested that unmatched DNA and fingerprints from the crime scene be compared to Irving's, but to date, those motions have been denied on procedural grounds. Since his conviction, Carruthers has maintained his innocence and has repeatedly asked state and federal courts for a new trial. But every court has turned him down, in part because the further along in the appellate process a defendant is, the more difficult it is to introduce new evidence, no matter how consequential. Compounding the problem is the fact that one of the primary mechanisms courts use to consider problems with death penalty convictions is ineffective assistance of counsel, a defendant's claim that the trial counsel did not provide a constitutionally acceptable level of representation. The catch-22 Carruthers faces is that he has never been able to make that claim because he was forced to represent himself. So you can't say, I didn't give myself appropriate counsel, even though he should fully be able to do that, because I could easily argue that this was not a that you, if you are not a lawyer and you are forced into this situation, is not a constitutionally acceptable level of representation. Okay, these things make me so angry. Because again, who is suffering? Poor people, mentally ill people, people of color, just fucking insane. And again, I know it's like so easy to be like, oh, this doesn't matter, this doesn't affect you. One day it fucking could. There are plenty of regular everyday people who are falsely accused of crimes. You think it couldn't happen to you, just like you could join a cult, you could be falsely accused of a crime and your whole fucking life could fall apart, and then you're gonna wish you cared about this shit. Carruthers' case demonstrates how deeply and dangerously the criminal legal system misunderstands serious mental illness. Today, Carruthers believes he is on death row because a grand conspiracy of judges, prosecutors, and his own defense attorneys put him there. Despite his upcoming execution, he continues to plan for his imminent release from prison and has asked past attorneys to help him price the Jaguar car he will buy with the millions of dollars he believes he's owed in damages. Honestly, sanest thing the guy said, because he's fucking right. He does deserve millions of dollars in damages. And he has spent decades covering his letters and legal filings with numerology and magical symbols. All right, well, that feels targeted. Particularly the number 3.3, which is the section of the Tennessee Rules of Professional Conduct that requires attorneys to display candor to the court. The verse from the book of Ezekiel about the prophet eating the word of God via scroll that tasted as sweet as honey, and the amount of money 3.3 million Carruthers maintains he will receive from judges and attorneys as a result of their conspiracy against him. It sounds like the man's manifesting to me. In 2007, the Supreme Court ruled in Panetti v. Quarterman that a defendant must have a rational understanding of why they are being executed in order to qualify as competent for their death sentence to be carried out. Yet Carruthers believes that the state is about to execute him because of an elaborate decades-long conspiracy that has no basis in reality. After visiting Carruthers in jail in May of 2005, one of his post-conviction attorneys wrote in a memorandum that it was impossible to convey the sheer impossibility of penetrating Tony's paranoia, and has reiterated in recent affidavits that Carruthers' beliefs are not consistent with reality. If he is executed, Tony Carruthers will be the only person in the United States in more than a century to be put to death after being forced against their wishes to represent themselves at trial. Had the judge not denied him the right to counsel guaranteed by the Constitution, it is doubtful he would be facing execution at all. Sophia Lorenzi, mic drop for you. Mic drop for you. And, it is crazy to me that I had to go to like a legal specific blog to get, 75% of the information. Read other articles about it. They're not sharing that level of information, which completely changes the story. Other places are just like, yeah, they botched an execution of a guy who buried a lot of people alive. And they're leaving out complete fucking details, which is why it's so important. It's so important to do a little bit, extra due diligence in stories like this, because this to me, like this story, this is what, this is why I do Without a Country. This is what this show's all about. I want to wrap up soon, so I just want to do one last article, and I'll do a couple other things. Maybe I can move some stuff to next week. But just real quickly, my, kind of my girl topics. Most of my topics were main story and WAC mailbag today. But I do think it's important to, in case you missed it, this is from Fox News, to note that Tulsi Gabbard has resigned from the Trump cabinet. Her reasoning is that her husband Abraham was recently diagnosed with this rare form of bone cancer, which she wrote in her resignation letter. But, as we've pointed out on the show, as multiple news articles have pointed out, as AOC has pointed out, it is very interesting how the people to drop like flies first from the, from Trump land are all women who, really, to borrow from The Godfather, went to the mattresses for him. Is that the right use of that? I like to put in some, I've seen that movie 3 times. It still doesn't fully make sense to me. All right. And then also, we were waiting for this 2024 Democratic, the DNC autopsy. They did it, but it's a complete mess. I don't even think it's really even that fucking valid. They didn't look into the effect that like Gaza and Israel had on it. They didn't interview Kamala. They didn't interview Biden. Like, it's just like, I don't even know what they were fucking doing here. So, I mean, there's an article called Takeaways from the DNC Autopsy on CNN. It's just a fucking mess. It's so Democratic Party that the autopsy of the DNC was in and of itself as messy as the reasons why we had the autopsy in the first place. It's like every time I hear something that the Democrats did, in my head, like the show That's So Raven, I think that's so Democrats. That's what I say in my head. All right, but let's wrap this up with, I talked a little bit earlier about being really careful about ICE if you're going to the World Cup. And then just today, I think we knew this was coming. It had been teased, but that feels like too light of a word. But NPR published an article that I didn't see in enough places, that ICE is spending millions of dollars on iris scanners, expanding its arsenal of tech tools. This is by Meg Anderson, again for NPR. The Department of Homeland Security. Oh, let me move this up. Sorry, this teleprompter, so I can make eye contact with you guys. But this is
I'm interested. You've obviously done a little bit more homework on this so far than I have. Is this at all related to the what is that? Sam Altman has like his thing that's been using an orb to scan people's eyes for years to like create the like one internet ID database or whatever.
This was one of the last ones I added to the docket because it was published today. But I don't think I saw
some pretty crazy
Sam
like
Altman. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them, but it feels like weird timing because like wouldn't have Sam Altman been too busy to make this deal because he had his court case? But I don't know. I'm sure he can multitask.
yeah, no, I mean he's been collecting people's eyeballs for like half a decade now. He's doing that for a reason.
Well, yeah. Well, and what do you think it is for? I feel like there's something more lucrative than a government deal with ICE. I feel like there's something like even deeper than that. Like it seems like government run programs aren't the most lucrative things for these tech billionaires.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like government contracts for surveilling the population is where the money is for all of
and
these tech
Israel and that documentary with Ronan Farrow, certainly speaks to that.
They want our eyes. Well, somebody was saying that like you'll have to use your eye to like, like if you want to log into your Instagram, it's not going to be long before like your front camera is scanning your eye to be like, are you actually Corinne Fisher?
100%. Well, I mean, that was my number one problem when I signed up for Clear. And like, we're talking about Tony Carruthers being forced into representing himself because they got impatient with him. I didn't want to sign up for Clear because you have to scan your eyeballs when you show up at the airport to get in. And, this was years ago. And I was like, seems like a fucking problem. But I literally, it was like, I got to the airport for a gig a couple years ago and I was on time, but the TSA line, the line was so crazy that unless I signed up for Clear in that moment, I would miss my flight and then probably miss my gig. So because of that, I go, guess they're scanning my eyeballs. And I mean, I think about that every time that I go to the airport. So it is, my eyeballs are already on the thing, which is it's really crazy that people even get away with murder now with the amount. It's so much harder these days. People were getting away with murder willy-nilly, a couple decades ago.
I saw something that was like, obviously on the more paranoid side of things, but it was like, they said the mark of the beast is coming. They never said, how it was going to be. So it's like some people are going straight biblical with their conspiracy theories.
Well, good thing that Pope Leo is involved then.
Yeah, he wants us out of this probably for good reason. Right.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of I've heard Mark of the Beast more in the past couple of years than I've ever heard it before. But also people have been using it like to, saying that like Jewish people have it, and that almost, knocked me to my out of my seat at a comedy show when people applauded that. So, but again, put a pin in it. All right. So wrapping up today's show, this is NPR. ICE is spending millions of dollars on iris scanners. Again, Meg Anderson for NPR. The Department of Homeland Security is expanding its capacity to scan irises as part of its mass deportation efforts, a move that has raised concerns among privacy experts that the agency, flush with an influx of funding, is gathering biometric data from people it detains. The agency awarded $25 million no-bid contract last week to B12 Technologies, a company that specializes in iris scanning. That kind of reminds me of the Graduate, where he's like plastics, and then the 2026 version of the Graduate would be like iris scanning. It's the future. The new contract is more than 5 times the amount of the company's last DHS contract awarded last fall. NPR reached out to is that BI2 or B12? I think it's BI2. Multiple times regarding its work with ICE, but did not hear back. As part of its proposal, the company, DHS, requested more than 1,500 iris scanners, as well as access to the company's mobile app, including a database where iris scans are stored. Irises contain intricate patterns that are unique to each person, similar to a fingerprint. DHS declined an interview, but told NPR in a statement that ICE officers use iris recognition technology, quote, to assist in accurately identifying individuals encountered during immigration enforcement and removal operations, including confirming identities and backgrounds of individuals who may be subject to enforcement actions. That may include people like Noralie Mejas Caceres. One night last fall, she was with her husband and first grade son in her Chicago apartment when a Black Hawk helicopter filled with federal immigration officers descended on the building. This is a good use of tax dollars. We were in our room. We were sleeping. When they knocked on the door, they were pointing guns at us and they ordered us to leave, Mejas told NPR, speaking through an interpreter provided by the University of Chicago Immigrants' Rights Clinic, which is representing Mejas in a complaint against the federal government. Or is it Mejas? Mejas fainted during the raid. When she came to, officers pointed a smartphone at her face to take her photo, she says. She had been crying and her eyes were swollen. They asked me to open my eyes wide for the photo, so I did. I opened my eyes wide for the camera, she said. The officers were then able to identify her. Mejas, who had a pending asylum case, was detained and eventually deported. She is now living in Venezuela with her family. Nicole Hallett, a law professor at the University of Chicago and director of the Immigrants' Rights Clinic, believes the officers wanted more than just an image of Mejas's face. She thinks they wanted a photo of her irises. There were other people who were arrested during this raid who reported having a photo taken of them and then having details about them known to the officers. Noralie is the one that we were most certain was an iris scan because of the detail about how she needed to open her eyes, Hallett said. Sheriffs have used the technology for decades. A video on I think it's BI2's YouTube channel says it was created 20 years ago. During the first Trump administration, the company donated iris scanners to sheriffs in the Southwestern Border Sheriff's Coalition, a group of sheriffs serving counties along the U.S.-Mexico border. Justin Smith, executive director of the National Sheriff's Association, says he used BI2 iris scanners in his jail for booking when he was the sheriff in Larimer County, Colorado. He described it as a camera device mounted on a pole that detainees looked into when they arrived at the jail. The captured image then went into a database. Smith says his deputies also used BI2's smartphones app in the field to identify people. He says it was particularly useful when officers were looking for someone specific, but who did not have identification. The only option in that scenario to identify the person, he says, would be to take them into custody to do fingerprints, which takes time. We don't like taking time. He says he can see how identifying someone quickly could be helpful in targeted immigration enforcement. They're trying to quickly identify within a large group, who do we have here, Smith said. It allows them to clear up people. Hey, we know who this person is. This is not the person you're looking for. Yeah, I'm sure that's how it's being used. But Smith says any technology that can access someone's private information has the potential to be abused. And the question of how law enforcement should use a certain tool depends on acknowledging that. I would say it's a balance test. It's not black and white, always this, never that, Smith says. It's a matter of how is it used. So I guess you could argue it's a similar conversation to the AI conversation at large. In the case of the Chicago apartment raid, for instance, Hallett said the only way they were able to identify people was to illegally arrest them and then use this technology in order to identify them. This is troubling because we really want law enforcement to be targeting particular people about which it has particular information, Hallett added. And here the government knew nothing before they pointed the device at our client and were able to call up her information from the database. Hallett is not the only person who doesn't trust ICE to use its technology appropriately against protesters and undocumented immigrants in particular. I don't trust anything that ICE is doing ever, period, hard stop. This agency has already proven themselves to be a very rogue agency, says Cooper Quinton, a senior staff technologist with the Electric Frontier Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for digital privacy. Could ICE start doing iris scannings of everybody they detain? Yeah, definitely using it on protesters. And then add to their database and use that for further surveillance? Yeah, absolutely. There is some precedent for that concern. Well, precedent doesn't mean anything though anymore. Half the time they're just doing whatever the fuck they want. NPR has documented multiple cases of federal immigration officers taking another type of biometric data, DNA samples from people they arrested, including legal observers and protesters who said they were peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights. Mariana Polleras, a researcher at the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law, says there are cases where biometrics are used simply for identification, such as when someone passes through airport security. But she says, the implications change when sensitive information is stored alongside other sensitive information. She says there are a lot of unanswered questions. What else is being collected? Poyara said, is there any kind of oversight as to who is overseeing these databases? I'm sure. What kind of data is being combined and aggregated, and for what use? Love these questions. Wish someone would answer them. In its statement, DHS told NPR that it is using every tool available in its efforts to find, detain, and deport, not your brains, and deport undocumented immigrants. And as its budget surged in the last year, the agency has collected a lot of tools to do so: facial recognition technology, license plate readers, and location trackers, among others. Well, what a way to end this episode, guys. I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today. I hope you learned. I hope you thought. I hope things both made you more aware, a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit more informed, a little bit more inquisitive, and wanting to kind of read up about some things on your own time. Again, if you want to join the Patreon and be under the great rule of our amazing dictator, Christopher Fungi, it's patreon.com/withoutacountry. You can help support this show for as little as $6 a month. And you have my undying thanks. You have my undying thanks, even if you're just tuning in every week. I really appreciate your time and your energy and your interest in the things that we talk about on this show. Of course, you can always contact me at withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at Without a Country Podcast. I'm on all social media at Philanthropy Gal. If you know someone who's seen the movie Obsession, which I know someone asked me about last week, I have since seen it. Recommend as a horror girly. It's also, if we want to talk about, a caste system financially, this is a film that was shot for $1 million independently. Then Blumhouse then bought it and had, distributed it. It's made over, it made over like $75 million the first weekend, increased 30% the second weekend. It's a real, when we're talking about like the American dream, this is a real American dream story for artists out there. So amazing work on that. And it's also a very interesting commentary on autonomy and feminism. I could go on and on about Obsession, but that's for, a horror podcast that I don't have. But if you know someone who's seen Obsession and also love the Knicks, please send them the Instagram reel that I am so proud of. And the things that I love the most perform at the absolute worst on social media. I think it's also because anything sports related, people don't know what I'm talking about, because my following is like 70 to 80% women. But yeah, I that was the last thing I posted was kind of like this it's basically POV. You wish that your girlfriend would like the Knicks more than anything else in the world, or love the Knicks more than anything else in the world, which if you've seen the movie makes sense. So please share that. Yes.
So that might just be a Venn diagram thing, because I'm all in on the Knicks and I had no idea that you were doing an Obsession thing. Like I saw that and I went, man.
Did you see the movie?
No. Why?
Oh, that's what I'm saying. You have to have seen both things.
Right. So it's a Venn diagram
you're saying,
thing.
Yeah, no. I realize
Like
I'm asking a lot of the audience.
See that movie are not going to know deep. Like they're not going to know the sixth man on the Knicks bench.
Okay, I only talked about it's mostly Jalen Brunson, so I'm using very easy. I didn't I agree with you that many horror people are not Knicks fans, but I would push. I think a lot of Knicks fans have seen Obsession. I know, but I think it's definitely skewing super male, because both horror and sports obviously skew super male. Love is a Battlefield says we have to arrest you to know if you're innocent is the new. We have to pass the bill to know what's in it. Interesting. I think I'm going to talk about a bill that's causing hysteria as usual, as they like to do with bills in the Patreon episode this week. But so pass that along. Also, go Knicks. We made it to the finals. I'm talking we now, but I'm being that person. We made it to the finals for the NBA finals for the first time in 27 years. This is truly historic. the song that was playing on the radio when the Knicks last made it to the NBA Finals was "Genie in a Bottle" by Christina Aguilera, just to set the scene a little bit. So go Knicks. So exciting. Mike, do you have anything that you want to tell the people about before we sign off this week?
Yeah, I mean, I wanna reiterate your statements. Go New York, go New York, go. I'm pretty sure we're gonna do a full another episode before they have to play another game because they were that dominant in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah.
I think next Wednesday is the first day of the playoffs
Lord.
at 8:30. So I was going to talk to you because we have to adjust the time because I got to watch this game.
We'll figure it out because
Okay.
no one's missing a Knicks Finals game. I'm gonna be locked in for everyone.
Absolutely.
Also in that same vein, I
Wait, where'd you go?
what?
You lost. You said I, and then you went out.
Oh, can you can hear me now?
I can hear
right?
you now. Yeah.
Okay. So I have the Armored League coming up on June 4th. We're over 90% of the way sold out. So chances are by the time you hear this, you're not going to be able to get a ticket. So go see Backrooms this weekend. Brand new horror film by a 19-year-old director. The film features Mark Duplass, who they hired as an actor because they thought this kid would need another hand to direct on set. They said, nope, he has been building up this lore in his head for 6 years and he brought it to the big screen. I have not been this excited for a movie in a long time.
So I heard about Backrooms. I love the way you did that. It seems like Backrooms is paying you. Are you getting Are you getting under the table money to promote Backrooms on podcasts?
No, I just listen. Like I'm fascinated by this. This was a project that a very creative kid saw, like some random 4chan post. He created his own lore and backstory via like a CGI engine that he was able to build himself. He built this up, on like fan forums and websites for years. And when it came time to like, okay, somebody's going to A24 is going to put some money behind this and make this into a movie. People were really hesitant about giving, I think at the time he was an 18-year-old kid, like, hey, you're directing this major motion picture for this awesome art house company. And it, I was sold on the story, and everyone who's worked on it says this kid is a true visionary. So I'm excited to see what he puts on screen.
Yeah, and it's based off of as many independent success stories are, it's based off of a short film. So in 2022, he created a short film by the same name, and kind of has this proof of concept, which if you are a budding filmmaker out there, that's the, probably, and if you like, if you have no representation, like for me, because I have representation, like, or if you have representation, you could most likely write a script and then do it from there, and work from the script. But if you have no representation and you're truly just a person with a passion for filmmaking out in the world, whether it be horror or some other genre, making a short film is the proof of concept. And like, you can make the short film that the director of Obsession made, Milk and Cereal like serial killer. He made that for $800. So please don't make excuses for yourself that, oh, you don't have the money to do things. If you are a creative person, you can do a lot with a little. You're going to probably need a small team of friends who believe in your vision. That's the most, that's something money can't buy. And the premise for Backrooms is a therapist enters another dimension to find her lost patient, which is really cool. Love that. And so that comes out. So I'm excited to see that for sure. I love good horror films, especially leading into the summer, but always. And all those things are things that you can do. Again, if you want to email me, it's withoutacountrypodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon. Peace. Bye.
Running from the man, yeah, the madman's coming, yeah, the man's gunning for me tonight. I spent the last week running from the heat, but the beat's coming alive.